Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1084 of the War News stream. And today we have massive news. A Russian plane violated Poland's airspace today, and it also looks like Ukraine's advancing deep into Russia's Kursk region, and there's major escalation with Iranian forces in the Middle East. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we have gotten significant news over the past 48 hours that Ukrainian armed forces have been able to conduct successful counteroffensives on all fronts, pushing the Russian Federation back, and not only that, putting them on the defensive in practically every single major battlefield that is currently being waged inside of Ukraine and the Russian Federation currently at this moment. At the exact same time, we've been able to hear of major escalations being made inside of the Middle East, as we have heard that the United States of America has issued an ultimatum to the Islamic Republic of Iran and their proxies inside of the Gaza Strip that all hostages are to be released by noon this Sunday, Saturday, lest they face the combined might of the Israeli and U.S. armed forces and an armed intervention to destroy Hamas and most likely occupy the Gaza Strip. And this comes at the exact same time as the diplomatic situation in the Middle East appears to be tense, as the Syrians have now refused the Russian Federation armed forces access to the port of Tartus for them to be able to leave, as it appears that talks are now falling apart once again in between the Syrian interim government and the Russian Federation, practically meaning that at this point, the interim government is holding approximately 1,500 Russian soldiers and their equipment hostage inside the Syrian interim government. We have also been able to hear inside of the nation of Egypt that all diplomatic talks with the United States have been suspended over the possibility of taking on Palestinian refugees from the Gaza Strip in a possible invasion, as the nation of Egypt has declared they will be taking no refugees from the Gaza Strip in fear that Hamas may come with them into Egypt. We have also been able to hear some major news in the meantime that the United States of America and the Western world is working resolutely and resoundly to deal with Russian aggression inside the war in Ukraine, and not only that, to ensure that their economy is truly brought to its knees. We have been able to hear that the United States is still cooking up at this point terrible sanctions, mind you, on the Russian economy that will largely freeze any Russian oil exports outside of the Russian Federation. Not only that, we've been able to hear significant news from inside the European Union that they are preparing for a massive operation to seize every single Russian shadow tanker around the world in one fell swoop to stop the Russian Federation from ever being able to export any liquefied natural gas or oil resources from Russian ports. This comes as major shocks reverberated through the Russian economic world today, as the Republic of India has openly refused, as of this day, the importation of Russian oil resources. As a Russian tanker bound for the port of Mumbai has been stopped outside of the port and is being refused port entry to offload its oil into the Republic of India, meaning that India is now sourcing their oil products from other nations rather than the Russian Federation. We have also been able to get significant news today that the Russian Federation has violated NATO airspace once again in a shocking incident where a Russian military aircraft near to the area of Gdansk, formerly called Danzig, flew within Polish airspace for a little over a minute and then turned away and headed back towards Kaliningrad. The second such instance in the entirety of the war where Russian military aircraft have violated NATO airspace deliberately to test reaction times of NATO armed forces near to the eastern frontier. We have also been able to hear more significant news once again from the front lines in greater detail of the Ukrainian counteroffensives that are occurring at this moment and the Russian defensives that are now ongoing at this point. There is a load of news to cover today. As a matter of fact, this isn't even all of the news that we have. There is still, I would say, tons, if not dozens of others of pieces of news that I haven't even been able to give you all the general overview on. But today is an absolutely massive day in terms of news of what's been going on. I'm moving all directly into some of the larger and more shocking pieces of news that we have today. We were able to hear that inside of Ukraine, the Russian Federation is doing horrendously bad. In fact, it is about as bad as we have seen so far, as it appears that the Russian Federation has not only been put on the defensive inside of the Kursk Oblast, like many of y'all know, but on Sunday, we also got additional information that the Ukrainians have started to conduct a counteroffensive near to the city of Pokrovsk to stop any kind of Russian advances and to also push the Russians further back from the city. This appears to have gone successfully in both directions, not only inside of Pokrovsk, but also in Kursk. Additionally, we have also been able to hear that the Ukrainians have stopped the Russian advance near Velika Novoselka, they have stopped the advance in Toretsk, they have stopped the advance in Chasiv Yar. They are thwarting Russian attack attempts near Seversk, and it appears that the Russians are still taking some decent losses in the Vovchansk and northeastern directions, although we do not have specific video or picture evidence within those fronts. We have also been able to see that simultaneously, while the Ukrainians were conducting these counterattacks or brand new offensives inside of Russia, the Ukrainian drones began to rain down on the cities of Saratov and Engels along the Volga River. A fan favorite here on the channel at this point, because Saratov and Engels have been hit consistently for weeks at this point by mass Ukrainian drone strikes for the large part. I was about to say drone and missile, but we'll probably get to that here in a little bit. Missiles aren't really around yet, but they most likely will be here within a couple of months. But we have been able to hear that Saratov was having a horrendous time overnight. We were able to see this clip almost reminiscent of World War II as Russian searchlights illuminated the Saratov sky. Explosions were going off in the background as Ukrainian drones were coming in, hitting Russian oil refineries, war industry, and not only that, other major sites within Engels and Saratov. The Russians are turning on the searchlights and attempting to spot these drones, but it appears that multitudes of them are already making impact further on behind the searchlights on the refineries and war industry that exists within this area of Saratov.
Oh, bliat, it's like the lights of Hollywood, bliat, but it's not Hollywood, it's the stars are falling, bliat.
Oh, hey, Igor, it looks like another production is being aired on the other side of Saratov. Oh, what is it, Blade? Your ass is getting beat. It's live on television. Like, we're here. It's just like, look, we're on television.
This is like what happens when the prisons are looking for people. They turn on the spotlights and start shining them around the air like this.
Man, honestly, man, living in Russia is like living in a prison, man. It's like, oh, I live in Kami Block 10,173 in the city of Saratov. I work in liquor store, bled, making Smirnoff, bled. You know, it's like, it's not a great existence in Russia in the first place. This really adds to the whole feel of it not being a great thing. But we did get to see another clip here showing us the explosion and the sound of the air raid sirens as the searchlight looks around. I can already hear in the distance near that searchlight, Achtung! Achtung meinen Linien! It's like they run to the anti-aircraft positions. It's World War II all over again. But still, it is a incredibly interesting ordeal to see that the city is getting hit again. And not only that, it appears that the refinery in the town has been hit for the third time in a row now in about under a month. To give you all an idea of where this refinery is, I have to take y'all to the city of Saratov and show y'all specifically the location of the refinery, which I remember last time was a little bit of a difficult one because it's hard to see it. Oh, wait a minute, there we go. Here it is, right here. This is the refinery. This refinery has been hit twice already before the attack that we just saw over the past month, and now as of today, it has been hit for the third time. It appears that the Ukrainians are now conducting a new kind of a drone campaign. Instead of causing damage to the refineries that takes them offline for some time and pretty much rotating out the refineries that they're hitting and just ensuring that there's a general percentage of refineries that are offline, it now appears that they've completely changed their strategy and they're going for a complete knockout on each refinery that they're targeting. Instead of just hoping that they're offline for a couple of months, they are trying to cause enough damage that they may be offline permanently because the financial costs required to bring the refineries back up to operational status. And this means that with the Ukrainians conducting more precise and more coordinated attacks like these on specialized or really precise refineries, this will start to greatly amalgamate the damage far more than we ever saw in the refinery campaigns of early 2024, where we saw the Ukrainian drones were conducting the exact same kind of tactics, but once again rotating their targets to hit different refineries throughout the area of the Russian Federation. This time, they're focalizing and targeting specific ones and attempting to completely take them offline permanently. This may also be a change of strategy due to a change in the U.S. position in the war. It appears that we're going still with a peace through strength sort of an initiative, and also it may be a major change because the Ukrainians have now heard that some companies are turning off some of their refineries for good. For example, I will bring y'all to the one that we're talking about here near Nizhny Novgorod, specifically the one right down here at Kostovo. We were able to hear that one of these refineries has actually been taken offline permanently at this point because the company that ran it simply stated that financially they do not have the money nor the means to actually be able to repair the facility from the damage sustained and get it back online. With this in mind, the Ukrainian armed forces may be realizing that a lot of these Russian oil and gas companies are truly at their financial breaking limit. And so instead of just trying to rotate around the damage and just keep a certain percentage offline, they're going to knock them out for good. And over time, most likely over the course of this whole year, we'll start to see that the percentage of refineries offline will be far higher because of that consequence than they were last year, conducting the same kind of attacks, but in a different kind of a way. It's a very big thing, and it looks like the Russian Federation is not really going to be doing too well financially because of these attacks, and not only that, this is going to be greatly hindering the Russian Federation's long-term war planning, as once again, the fuel reserves are going to start being expended at a far faster rate than could ever be imagined. At this point, we're expecting that the Russians have gotten close to consuming 900,000 barrels of usable fuel products per day in the Russian Federation because of the significant deficit that exists. If the Russian Federation sees that a higher percentage than 15% of the refineries have been knocked out, that will start to surpass 1 million barrels of usable fuel products per day, which will start to greatly drain the Russian oil strategic fuel reserves and oil reserves because they simply will not be able to keep up with the domestic demand and the supply of fuel products for the economy and also the military. But moving on from that, not only is the Russian Federation taking significant losses in their domestic fuel production, it appears that they're about to be taking a significant loss in other categories that are of even more significant note for the Russian Federation in the short term. Many know that the Russian Federation has attempted to try and find ways to create loopholes or get around the massive sanctions that were imposed under the last U.S. presidency on the Russian Federation. And one of the ways that they were able to do that, and we're not speaking about the liquefied natural gas and electricity exports to Eastern Europe, which were never sanctioned from what we can tell. We're actually talking specifically about the Russian liquefied natural gas and oil exports that were being conducted from the Russian Federation into other countries around the world. Usually, this was not done by pipeline, this was done by ship. And this means that when the sanctions came down, that Russian oil tankers could not transport this fuel, oil and other kinds of liquefied natural gas, around around the world, this could cause the Russian Federation a financial collapse outright. So what the Russian Federation did, and this is where the Shadow Fleet comes from, is that they did not use Russian vessels to deliver the fuel. They would instead use countries, vessels that were flagged in other countries, for example, a nation like Panama, which is usually a flag of convenience, but we won't get into that rabbit hole. That's an incredibly long one. But beyond that, they would use ships that were flagged in other countries to be able to transport Russian fuel exclusively. This pretty much created a brand new Russian tanker fleet, and none of it was based in the Russian Federation, meaning that they were able to ensure that they were still making money, at least governmentally and economically, off of the oil and liquefied natural gas exports, but at the same time, they were circumventing the sanctions where they wouldn't get into any sort of a major diplomatic incident because of it. It appears that the European Union has had enough of this for the large part, and it appears that the hammer is going to be brought down incredibly soon on the Russian Federation and these kinds of exports. Another thing that I want to make a little bit clear about these exports is that these are something that the Russian Federation actually has the ability to continue to produce, although the Russians are dealing with an extremely severe kind of a fuel deficit inside the Russian Federation. Because some people would think, well, if they're going through a fuel deficit, how are they still exporting oil or other kinds of products like that? The difference is that Russian oil production is still incredibly high. It's one of the largest in the world currently. Of course, they can't beat out the good old US of A, but nevertheless, it is one of the highest in the world still. The problem with oil is that oil cannot be put into the tank of a car or an 18-wheeler or a locomotive or a jet as it is. Oil requires refining. And refining is something that is fairly difficult. And there really isn't a large amount of refineries around the world, but these refineries that do exist are massive and are able to refine hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil into refined fuel products that can be used for different kinds of industrial applications. And one of those is fuel. Now, how this works is that refining fuel is usually something that is done inside the country that is going to consume the fuel. That is not done in the country that ships it. So to give you a little bit of an example here to explain why the Russians really have never actually seen their oil exports crippled that much up until recently is, for example, the United States is the largest producer in the world currently of crude oil or oil of any sort. What the United States does, though, is that when they hear, like, let's say, for example, China, which is a massive consumer of oil imports around the world, considering that they don't have a large domestic production of it, a Chinese company will fill out a request or a purchase order from a U.S. oil company to get oil. The purpose of doing that is so that way they can convert it into fuel. But instead of the United States converting the oil into fuel and then shipping it over to China, what we do is that we just load the oil onto an oil tanker, and that oil tanker takes the crude oil all the way from the United States across the Pacific to China, and then China takes that crude oil and then refines it into the fuel products they need. That's how the global oil system largely works for the large part. So usable fuel products are largely an endpoint kind of a product and usually are rarely ever shipped around. And if they are, it's incredibly expensive. And not only that, usable fuel products do actually have a bit of a shelf life as compared to crude oil, which never expires. Crude oil has been sitting in the middle of the earth for millions of years. It's not going to be expiring anytime soon. But nevertheless, the Russian Federation has never been impacted in this way like the Ukrainians have been impacting their refineries. The Ukrainians are hitting the refineries and knocking out Russia's ability to have gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and any other kind of fuel imaginable. But what the Ukrainians have not been able to knock out, at least in any major way, is the crude oil that the Russian Federation has in massive amounts and is still producing in incredibly large amounts, although they have been cutting it down because storage facilities are becoming a little bit slim these days because the Ukrainians have been hitting those as well. But nevertheless, Russian tankers are still having the same run-of-the-mill that they were having before the war. Crude oil is still widely available, and because Russian refining abilities have been reduced at least by 15%, there's actually more crude oil sitting around being unused by the Russian Federation now than ever, making the price of Russian crude oil fairly cheap. So all they have to do is go to a port like Ust-Luga, which is right over here, load up the oil tankers, you could see them right here, with crude oil, and they can ship those wherever they want around the world, and the Russian Federation can continue to make money to finance the war effort. This has been the major problem so far with the Russian Federation largely skirting around the sanctions is because the Shadow Fleet, that's where I was about to say shank, because I was about to mix up Shadow Fleet and sanction, but Nevertheless, the Shadow Fleet has been able to completely circumvent the sanctions and ensure that the Russian Federation continues to finance its war effort in this way. But it appears that Europe has had enough, as we have been able to hear that the European Union is preparing for a massive operation to seize all Russian-linked tankers of the Shadow Fleet in the Baltic. New legislation will allow ships to be seized for damage they may cause to the environment and for damage to submarine cables and other critical infrastructure. It appears that this is a bill not only targeting the Russian Federation vessels that are operating under the flags of different nations, but still operating for the Russian Federation nonetheless, but it's also going to be targeting their sabotage attempts on critical NATO infrastructure lying at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. This is giving us the understanding that the European Union is going to start massively bearing down, for the large part, on the Russian Federation and their ability to export fuel. One of the last economic lifelines that they have available for the Russian government to be able to continue to get some kind of revenue and to continue to finance the war. Another interesting thing about this is that it is targeting the Baltic specifically. Now, there are fueling nodes, I do want to remind everyone, there are fueling nodes in other areas of the Russian Federation. For example, Novorossiysk does have a fueling node, which is right here, although it's a fairly small one, and this is for smaller vessels, meaning that the Russian Federation is not able to export the sheer volume of fuel that they would be able to out of Ust-Luga. Also, another issue with this fueling port is that it was knocked out about a month ago by the Ukrainians, and we have not heard that it has been brought back online. So we still assume at this point that this fueling terminal is offline at the moment, and this means that the only one on the east coast, or really the eastern area of the Russian Federation that's usable, is up in Ust-Luga. So every single Russian tanker that is transporting fuel around the world to make Russian money has to travel through the Baltic. And now with this legislation that's soon to be passed by the European Union, this gives the authority to any European Union nation, Denmark, Germany, Poland, Sweden, Finland, the Baltic states, and so on, that if they see a Russian Shadow Fleet vessel, even if it is flagged by another nation, and they believe that it is conducting sabotage or trying to conduct sabotage, the European Union can seize practically any vessel that is suspected to be operating in the Shadow Fleet. This also means
that's pretty wide-ranging authority right there on that. I'm sure that's going to cause Russia to want to go berserk, because they're already claiming that the NATO countries are conspiring to basically stop their oil shipments, and considering they're now having the authority to seize any vessel that they want to, if they suspect it of sabotage, that will probably send the Russians over the edge when it comes to responding to that one.
It might actually send them over the edge, because this is one of their largest financial links to the outside world that still exists. And now it appears that the European Union is going to put it under threat. Let me explain this in a much simpler way, because this is actually what's about to happen. So right now, the European Union pretty much controls the Baltic Sea. So imagine this as the hallway in and out of your office at work. So what the boss of the hallway is saying is that if you walk down the hall, or you have anyone trying to come to your office to conduct business with you, and it looks like they might be about to vandalize the office, the boss can simply walk outside, slap handcuffs on them, and take them away, and never allow them to get to your office. That is what the European Union is about to be doing. And they might exercise a great deal of leniency with that interpretation, and European Union nations may start to seize all Russian Shadow Fleet vessels that are heading to Ust-Luga, which may completely cut off in the future any kind of Russian access to the outside world and the export of usable fuel products. But another shocking revelation was made today. Russian trading partners for fuel products, largely just oil and liquefied natural gas, is fairly slim today. Slim pickings out there. Some of the countries that have access to the Russian market, or some countries that have allowed themselves access to the Russian market, are countries like the People's Republic of China, Vietnam, India, Pakistan, largely the entire area of Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and East Asia as a whole, and just really China, have access to the Russian fuel market, or the Russian oil market. We have now heard today that the second largest part of this fuel market, which is the Republic of India, has now stopped a Russian oil vessel, one of the tankers that was arriving from Ust-Luga, and is not allowing it into the port to be able to sell its 1 million barrels of sanctioned Russian oil. This is shocking. It is 1 million barrels of usable fuel products that is currently aboard this tanker that is sitting outside of the port of Mumbai right now. And it is being banned from entry into the port of Mumbai. This is a huge deal. 1 million. I want to put this out there. Fuel consumption in India. Let me go get this number for y'all, because I want to let y'all know the size of this fuel import. Let's see. Well, dang, that's not really the way you do it. You do it in barrels per day. Why can't they just give us that number? What the hell's going on here? Let's see. So, as far as their consumption of usable fuel products, which is a very hard number to find, it appears that they consume... Why in the world is no one just giving this in barrels per day anymore? Like, it's like no one's doing that right now, and I'm trying to find y'all the number. But I believe India consumes, let's see, barrels per oil per day in India. Let me just go see if I can get the number that way. So, India consumes approximately 5 million barrels of usable fuel products per day. This oil tanker,
man. So that one tanker right there is carrying 1/5 of their daily supply. That's crazy.
Yes, 1/5 of their daily supply was on board the ship. Now you can kind of get the idea of the lucrativeness of the Russian oil tankers, is that most of these are that large that it's carrying 20% of India's fuel consumption in that one ship right there. And it was about to drop off 1 million barrels of oil to be refined at Indian refineries and then to be sold in the Indian market. That would have made Russia a load of money. I mean, like, that, to put this into perspective here, how many barrels of oil are on that ship? That is huge. That is massive. To give y'all an idea of how big these tankers are and how much money is sitting in that thing, let me go get y'all the number for the United States of America. We consume 20 million barrels of oil per day, meaning that this one tanker carries 5% of our daily fuel consumption in the U.S., to give you an idea of how big that ship is. And it's now being barred entry into India. This is going to send the Russians probably into a tizzy, because that is a load of money for the Russian oil companies to make. That is a load of money that the Russian Federation's government will not see at all, not a cent of, because it's now being barred entry because it is carrying sanctioned oil. And now the Republic of India is starting to turn away from the Russian Federation and their oil and raw materials imports, because it appears that India is starting to move closer and closer into a US-aligned direction and moving farther and farther away from the Russian Federation and any kind of connection, even if it is an economic connection of convenience at this point. It is wild, crazy. I mean, it's absolutely insane to see something like that, and it appears that the Russian Federation is in for it at this point as far as the oil exports go. That's if they can even get them out of the Baltic Sea with the legislation that it appears the EU is going to soon pass, much less their actual bank of customers is starting to shrink. And one of the largest ones, India, appears to have now stopped the importation of Russian oil as of today. Now this is something else that will be wildly interesting for all of y'all to know as a side note. This oil tanker is not going to sit there forever. Right now, it's calling up largely its contractor or its company inside of whatever country it's in. Largely, it's going to be contacting their actual operatives inside of Russia, and they're going to be asking them, what do we do next and where do we go? Because now the plan is going to be to stop the excessive cost of keeping this oil in the ship, because that starts to lower the profits overall. And so they're going to have to race to some other market somewhere to be able to offload that oil and make some money off of it. So they're most likely going to pick another country like the People's Republic of China, or maybe a Eastern African country just to dump the fuel in, so that way they can try and make some money off of it and not completely lose their shirts just sitting there with this tanker moored off of Mumbai, probably for a month or maybe even longer than that, being barred from entering and offloading the oil and making its profits. So a pretty wild thing, really, to look at. And just absolutely crazy to think, the world is imploding on the Russians right now. No one's really wanting to have dealings with them anymore at all. And what's even crazier than that is that while this is all going on, Zelensky has made a statement, well, at least not really a statement. Well, I guess you could call it a statement, couldn't you, Matthew? I mean, like, you know, offensive advances are a statement in itself, I guess, for the large part.
Yes, you could say.
I guess you could say. But it appears that President Zelensky has been making some statements recently, while the Russian Federation is getting shafted, in lack of better words, around the entire world economically right now in the oil market. They've been making statements, pretty big ones, mind you, in Kursk, in Pokrovsk, in Toretsk, in Chasiv Yar, and in Seversk. The Ukrainians are stopping Russian advances outright right now today, or they are pushing them back. And in the Pokrovsk and Kursk areas, we are seeing the most shocking Ukrainian counteroffensives that have occurred in a couple of months at this point, as Ukrainian forces are actively pushing Russians back in both directions. Moving on into the Kursk area, we have been able to see that there's been some pretty big workings going on here. The Ukrainians are still advancing towards Borky at this moment. We do understand that fighting is still ongoing somewhere within the town of Ulanok at this time, as the Russian Federation is attempting to try and stop a further Ukrainian advance towards Giri, which was their farthest point of advance in the past. But it also appears that Ukrainian forces have now crossed the Sel River and are now beginning to engage Russian forces somewhere about a half a mile away from the village of Borky. It appears that the Russian Federation is not doing well in this direction, and we have been able to get some video footage of the Ukrainians hitting Russian forces in general throughout the entirety of the oblast and causing significant damage to the Russian defense forces wherever they may be. I also have to point out that we do not have any specific news or information at this point on the Ukrainian advance near to Malaya Lechnia. We did hear some possible information that the North Koreans have been moved back onto the line somewhere near Kromsky Byki, meaning that right now, if the Ukrainians are still advancing in this area, although we don't have news, there's a bit of a black hole going on there right now. If they are advancing in that area, they're most likely cutting down so many North Koreans that Kim Jong-un feels embarrassed because not even he could cut down that many inside of North Korea. We don't really know at this point, though. This area is largely void of any real frontline information about the advances. So at this point, we're saying that this line has stalled until we get further information, but the one down near Ulanok is continuing to move further south and towards Giri and Borky. But here is some footage that we did get of the Ukrainians hitting Russian forces within the area of Malaya Lechnia. And we can see here that they're showing the snow-covered fields. It appears to have snowed in Kursk again, and we can see the Russian vehicle sitting in the tree lines right there. We can now see the Ukrainian drone lining itself up for a nice dive, and it's going for the dive right there, and it appears that the Russians died as a consequence of that dive, to make it rhyme. But we can see there, the vehicle is now having an ammunition explosion, and appears to have been completely destroyed with the first drone strike. We can now see a second one coming in, doing what some would call a double tap, as it runs into it again to make sure that it is completely destroyed. And we can see the vehicles continuing to smolder and burn in the trees as the multiple drones were able to ensure the destruction of the vehicle. That's the end of the clip. And moving on from that and on into the next one, we were able to see that they were hitting some Russian forces in the 82nd Air Assault Brigade as well. We can see that generally snow cover is beginning to cover the entirety of the Kursk Oblast, which is giving us an idea that both of these videos are fairly recent. Snow coverage is not absolute and does change on a week-to-week basis throughout most areas of Ukraine and Russia at this point, so it gives us a fairly good idea of locating the exact time and date that things are happening. And considering that all footage came out today in Kursk and all of it showed snow, we are assuming that the entirety of the Kursk area and the battlefield is covered in snow. That is happening at the same time when you see the Ukrainians loading into the back of this Max Pro and racing on out of the area. Well, hang on. Oh, dang, the MRAP just got hit and it continued trucking on along.
Those MRAPs are tough, man. They can take a beating and keep on ticking, as they say, and that thing's ticking along.
And when you see it now breaking off the road and traveling even further, it appears to have been hit again by another drone, and it looks as though the MRAP is still going. It looks like it may be slowing a little bit. No, actually, it just kept going on along. That is crazy. That MRAP survived 2 direct hits, most likely from an FPV drone carrying an RPG-7 underslung on it, and it survived. That's a pretty impressive little Max Pro right there, and great to see that the Ukrainians not only were able to conduct a successful operation, but make it out alive thanks to the wonderful American-provided armored cars. Moving on from that and into a little bit of a behind-the-scenes footage, we were able to see some pictures. We believe this was most likely taken a couple of days ago. Well, actually, as a matter of fact, it's saying that this is from 2024, but it is showing the 95th inside of Kursk operating an L119, which is a 105mm light howitzer, but still very neat to see, but not really up to date at all. But moving on from that and out of the Kursk area, things were not going well for the Russian Federation in Kursk by any measure, by any means, I would largely say. But one thing that also appears to be a little interesting is that there are murmurs about the Ukrainians making these offensives right now inside of the Kursk Oblast. And not only that, once again conducting a counterattack in Pokrovsk and pushing the Russians back in this direction. And as the Ukrainian forces are pushing deeper into Kursk, people are wondering, is Ukraine trying to prepare for a land-for-land exchange? And it seems as though many people are saying, yes, Ukraine probably wants a land-for-land exchange at this point. Others, a smaller group of folks, are saying that Ukraine is simply distracting the Russians with this offensive in Kursk, and some are saying that the Kursk offensive is short-lived, about as short-lived as the Russians' ability to actually fight a war, which only lasted about a week. But Matthew, what are people saying about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So as we're seeing, the Ukrainians continue to push really deep into Kursk. In fact, much farther than some people were even expecting, is Ukraine trying to prepare for that land-for-land exchange. So 71% of the audience said yes, they want a land exchange, while 16% said no, Ukraine is simply distracting the Russians from other areas of the front lines, and 3% said, the Kursk offensive is probably going to be short-lived and not that long anyway. So generally on this one, I would say that, like the enforcer mentioned, there have been murmurs of a potential land-for-land exchange. The only catch is, though, would the Russians actually be willing to give up the Kursk region and then give up another region of Ukraine, and so that way Ukraine and Russia could swap those two pieces of land? Me personally, I don't think that Russia's willing to give up any part of Ukraine right now. Putin's also making it very clear he's really not willing to talk and be fair. He wants to take everything, or else he's basically just going to walk away. So, me personally, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that probably is Ukraine's goal behind this sudden, really strong push into Kursk. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I do believe that the Ukrainians are most likely shooting for a land-to-land exchange. I didn't include this specifically as a news bulletin today, but we did hear that the Ukrainians are open to some sort of a land-for-land exchange or the possible cessation of lands to the Russian Federation in the future. But of course, the caveat is that they require security guarantees from the United States and the European Union. But it does appear that the Russian Federation is not really doing incredibly well, and it highly would be possible that the Ukrainians may exchange the land in Kursk for land in Ukraine, and it may be something akin to they give up the land in Kursk and they get back the entirety of Zaporizhia or Kherson or some other area inside of the area of Ukraine, the pre-1991 borders, that is. So that's largely what I'm believing at this point. I think that that's most likely going to be the case, but we'll of course have to wait and see as time continues to pass exactly what the Ukrainians want, because sometimes the negotiating positions change, and considering that the Russians could largely piss on everyone at the negotiating table if we even get there at this point, we may see the negotiating positions change for the Ukrainians and the United States, and that they become more hardline on securing all of their ambitions on into the future. We'll just have to largely wait and see how that plans out, or games out for the large part. But while we're talking about how this is gaming out and how the United States and Ukraine are looking at really dealing with the Russians, we really have to talk about what the United States and another country are doing in the Middle East that appears to be gaming out the game in a different way, in a way that was unexpected and something that caught us off guard again. There's a lot of surprises these days, some pleasant, some are just surprises, but we're hearing a lot of different kinds of information at this point about what's going on around the world. And so let me make sure to get you all up to speed on what we're now hearing inside the Middle East. And that starts our news today in Washington, D.C., just passing very gracefully over the Gulf of America down there and on up into Washington, D.C., we were able to hear that the President of the United States has now issued an ultimatum. The President of the United States has stated that Hamas has until noon on Saturday to release all of the hostages. That's high noon, by the way, or else the ceasefire agreement in Gaza will be canceled, and he will let all hell break loose, practically meaning that there will be a U.S.-Israeli response to the situation and the lack of the release of hostages, and we will most likely see that a major conflict ensues once again inside of the Gaza Strip after a peace deal was brokered very quickly on, I would say, less than equal terms a little while ago in between Israel and the Iranian proxy of Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. This is a fairly interesting thing. And Hokie Rennick said, high noon local? Nah, I don't think it's on Washington time. I think it's high noon their time, I think. But that wasn't really specified. So it could be high noon anywhere. Hell, it could be high noon in like the OK Corral over somewhere in Tombstone, Arizona. I don't really know. But it's high noon somewhere. Kind of like it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So I don't know, unfortunately. But we'll be seeing what is going on out there in the world with that one. But it is a little bit of an interesting ordeal, and it's one that appears that isn't being taken lightly because we are hearing that there is already concerted action that is now going on to deal with the situation in the Gaza Strip by the Israelis. As the Israelis, I want to remind you all of this, we did heavily criticize the peace deal that was made, or the ceasefire agreement that was made in between Hamas and the Israelis, as it seemed incredibly unfair at the time, and I wasn't really that big of a fan of the kind of action that was made by, I'll just have to be honest here, because, you know, we're pro-American and I'm not political, but whenever a president doesn't really make a great action, we just generally call it for what it is in the foreign policy sphere. The current president did not do good negotiating the prior ceasefire, because the ceasefire that we're seeing right now in between Israel and Hamas was largely negotiated by him. And I'd have to say that it was incredibly one-sided towards Hamas, as the Israelis had to provide practically everything in exchange for hardly nothing in return from Hamas, rather than the return of about, I believe it was 30 hostages, and even out of that, not many of those came back. I believe it was only around 20 or so, if I'm correct. It wasn't even the full number. It appears that the President of the United States and Israel have now decided, much like we were saying, that the deal was incredibly one-sided and very unfair towards the Israelis, and so now they're reversing that, and now they're demanding the release of all hostages with no terms whatsoever. Otherwise, the U.S. and Israel are going to be taking strong military action against Hamas to go in there, clear Hamas out, possibly do other things, and then also release or find the hostages and then release them that way, which was originally what we were said on this channel about a month ago at this point, when this was originally coming into being, because that seemed to make the most sense, especially considering that Hamas can't even guarantee that these hostages have survived. And from what we understand, some of the hostages that were supposed to be released that were not released, possibly because they already had been killed by Hamas because of mistreatment or by a arranged execution at some point earlier on. Nevertheless, it does appear that the Israelis are beginning to mobilize reservists at this point. We were able to see that from the official IDF Twitter today, and it appears that the Israeli Defense Forces are already mobilizing and preparing for a new military operation inside the Gaza Strip. As far as we are concerned, this will be a sweep. The Israelis and the United States, if we get directly involved, will most likely be seeing little to no actual combat inside the Gaza Strip. Hamas is largely recovering from the Israeli occupation that occurred over the entirety of a year, where we saw that a lot of Hamas's fighting abilities were largely destroyed, and a decent amount of the tunnel networks used to covertly travel around the Israelis above ground have largely been destroyed at this point. So with this in mind, if the Israelis re-enter the Gaza Strip at this point, we will most likely be seeing that resistance is incredibly low, and the Israelis are largely able to control the situation from the onset instead of having to try and get control of the situation. Nevertheless, Hamas is a group that doesn't really work off of a lot of logic and really is more so propelled by emotion than the logic of the situation, and so a lot of people are wondering, will Hamas release those hostages and listen to the U.S. ultimatum, not only issued to them, but largely as an example to Iran itself, and release these hostages, or will they allow all hell to break loose? And it appears that a lot of people are believing that Hamas will not listen to the ultimatum, and all hell is soon to break loose in the hands of the Israelis and the United States inside the Gaza Strip. Others are saying it's a 50-50 chance. They might have all hell break loose on them. They might not. We'll just have to wait and see. Very few people have faith that Hamas actually will follow through from the start. Very small amounts of people are saying that Iranian proxies will comply, and some are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like a whopping 64% of the audience said all hell is going to break loose and the hostages are not going to be released by Hamas, while 22% said, I'd say it's about a 50-50 chance that all hell is going to break loose, and 7% said Iranian proxies will probably comply with the threat and let the hostages go. And this is always a tricky one. Like, trying to estimate anything in the Middle East is always a crapshoot. It's really a 50-50 chance every single time. But I would say this, considering the full might of the United States and Israel might be coming down on Hamas, that is a very, very strong motivator for them to actually let the hostages go, even though they really don't want to. And that's going to play quite heavily on them. So I'm going to say I'm actually with the 22%. I think it's a 50-50 chance. It could be Hamas is getting so desperate and they feel like they're getting backed into a corner that they don't let the hostages go and they risk attempting to call this bluff if it is a bluff at all. Personally, me, I don't think it's a bluff. I think it actually is a serious threat. And they could try to test it, but only time will tell. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in the words of Amber, a quote that will go down in the books, Middle East is easy to assume the worst, and I would have to agree. I believe that all hell's about to break loose. Hamas is a very stupid organization. I would generally say that anyone affiliated with the Iranians is a stupid organization. Hezbollah has no sense. Hamas has no sense. The Houthis have no sense. I don't even know how the hell, if y'all all remember this one, how the hell Hezbollah had pagers for like 10 years and nobody took them apart to realize that there was a bomb in their pager. You remember that, Matthew?
Yeah, nobody took them apart, but they were extremely hidden though. Like Israel did a hell of a job hiding that in the pagers, and they couldn't even find it probably if they wanted to.
I'm still going to say this though. An explosive big enough to blow off your testicles has to be large enough that if you unscrewed the pager apart and looked inside of it, you could find it. Like, it had to be a decently sized explosive right there. And the fact that they got those pagers, according to the Israelis, 10 years ago, used the same pagers. Pagers are supposed to be disposable, mind you, for 10 straight years, and then got their balls blown off when they were all remote detonated. That tells you that they don't really have a lot of sense. Like, that just doesn't make a lot of common sense to me. Because it's like, aren't pagers like the whole convenience of them that you can throw them away as soon as you get done using them, or that they're largely disposable and untraceable? It's like, wasn't that the whole point of the pager? It's like, why in the world hold on for 10 years? You may as well just be carrying around the smartphone at that point. But nevertheless, moving on from the lack of sense in Hezbollah, Hamas really didn't have a lot of sense either, because Hamas did a lot of blunders in the last Israeli campaign into the Strip that gave away a lot of Hamas positions way early on. For example, they would literally crawl out of the entrance of the tunnels and fire off rockets about 20 yards away, and then in clear view of an Israeli drone, they would walk right back to the tunnels, hidden entrance, open it, and then go back into the tunnel, completely giving away where the entrance to the tunnels were multiple times throughout the entirety of the conflict, really from the beginning of the Israeli entry into the Strip. So with that in mind, I would have to say they don't have a lot of sense, and going off of that, hell's about to break loose because they're not going to have enough sense to realize that this is a real ultimatum that will be followed through on. There is nothing stopping Israel or the United States from going in and wiping Hamas out. They're not a nuclear armed power. They're not a nation. They're a illegitimate terrorist force funded and supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and this provides them practically no protections from anyone around the world. And so if they had any sense, they would give over the hostages and spare themselves, but knowing how Hamas works, they probably will not. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. But while it appears that Hezbollah may have lost their balls and maybe have lost their schnozrilla, and as well as Hamas, we have also been able to hear that Egypt is apparently having some balls, much like Jordan and Syria, or the Syrian interim government, have already had in the past, as the Egyptians will not be accepting any Palestinians whatsoever. There's actually a fairly decent amount of information on this, and we now assume this is why the Egyptian military buildup near the border exists, is because Egypt has reportedly closed the door to any further discussions with the United States regarding the displacement of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, with Egyptian officials having presented several plans for rebuilding Gaza without any kind of displacement, at least one of these plans having been delivered to the current administration. The Egyptian government is said to be outraged by statements from both Israel and the U.S. calling for the total removal of the Palestinian population from Gaza, sending a message to the United States demanding clarification on recent comments made by the president, saying that sanctions could be imposed against Egypt if they refuse to accept Palestinian refugees. The basic run-of-the-mill for everyone is that no one wants to take the Palestinians, especially from the Gaza Strip. It's not that they have an issue with the Palestinians, is that they have an issue with Hamas. And the problem is that you cannot differentiate Hamas fighters from the Gaza population of Palestinians. So if you take the Gaza population and you redistribute them somewhere in the Middle East, what you're actually doing is that you're spreading Hezbollah from the small confined area of the Gaza Strip where it currently exists, and it will then be spread out amongst Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and allowed to radicalize native populations inside of these countries and turn them into supporters of the radical Iranian cause to conduct warfare against the state of Israel. I would have to say, I'll be entirely honest with y'all, the idea of forcefully displacing millions of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip not only brings up a lot of human rights concerns, but it also brings up a lot of concerns of geopolitical stability within the region, as we're practically transplanting the Hamas fighters that are currently held within the Strip and setting them loose onto the entirety of the Middle East at this point and everything surrounding Israel, pretty much creating Israel's enemies in even larger form than they see now, say 20 years down the road. It's not a great idea, and not only that, this would make it far easier for the Iranians to arm and supply these kinds of freedom fighters, if you want to call them that. We call them terrorists over here in this area of the world, because these folks are going to be in countries that are actually within the American sphere, at least at this point. Egypt is largely in the American security assurances sphere, as well as the Kingdom of Jordan, and the Syrian interim government appears to be heading in that direction as well. So this could happen much like what happened to Lebanon, where all these countries pretty much get hijacked by Hamas and end up becoming anti-American and anti-Israeli well on into the future, which is clearly against U.S. interests in the long term and seems to be a short-term aim that's not considering long-term American strategic and diplomatic consequences within the entirety of the region. And this has led a lot of people to largely talk about the issue, but one thing that's even more shocking is that while this whole issue is going on with Israel right now in the Gaza Strip, it also appears that things are not going well with the Russians in Syria in just a little bit of slightly northern area from Israel. Actually, funnily enough, the craziest thing about Syria is that Syria is actually south of Israel. Did you know that, Matthew?
Yes, I did know that.
Yeah, it's actually south of it. So I guess you could say that this is just a little bit south of Israel, because, of course, we're speaking of that area like Majal Shams, which is all the way up here, and the most southerly point of Syria is actually south of the most northerly point of Israel. Who would have thought? But beyond that, it appears that the Syrian interim government is banning the Russians from evacuating from the port of Tartus. As we were able to see today, that a Russian convoy has been halted in Tartus and is being denied an entrance into the port to be loaded up on the Russian warships and then shipped out back to the Russian Federation at this point. Also, I don't know if this is a time lapse or this person was really just driving like 120 miles an hour right there, but we can see them showing footage of all of the Russian vehicles. It appears to be a military police convoy, interestingly enough, that's now leaving, most likely from Himinin Airfield.
What were those nukes in the back of these trucks or something? What is that?
These are propane tanks, please. Like we keep
propane. It can be nuke if really desperate, bleed.
Actually, you are wrong. These are nukes of the pro-pain variety. We are pro of pain. Something like that. Oh, man. I'm telling you what. But still, they're being denied exit because it appears that the talks in between the Syrian interim government and the Russian Federation have fallen apart. Again, who would have thought that would have happened? And it appears that a lot of people are wondering what is going to be happening as Syria is continuing to pressure the Russians to extradite Assad or to face trial, or else they're not going to be allowing further Russians to leave the Syrian interim government at this point in their area of control. And a lot of people are wondering, will the Russians ever turn Assad over? And it looks like some people are saying that no, Russia will not ever turn him over. I had to read that exactly as it was written.
Man, don't make fun of my typo like that.
Man, I saw it and I was like, man, that actually was a pretty funny looking one. But also, some people are saying it's a 50-50 chance right now. A lot of people like to go with the tried and easy. It's a 50-50 chance. And others are saying that the Russians will turn him over soon. But that's a very small group of people who are believing that. But nevertheless, Matthew, what are people thinking at this point about the Syrian-Russian talks? Are they going to give Assad over, or are they going to tell them that this is basically Assad to try and even get him back? What are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so is Russia ever going to turn al-Assad back over to the Syrians to let them basically face trial? So it looks like 56% said no, Russia will never turn him over, while 15% said yes, Russia will turn him over soon, and 23% said it's a 50-50 chance right now. And on this one, this is a tricky one. We asked this question about a week ago, and it sounded like most people believe that he would probably not be turned over, and it sounds like most people still believe the same thing. But based on the fact that Russia cannot get into Tartus port without necessarily extraditing al-Assad back to Syria, that might change the equation just a little bit. Because what's more important, making sure al-Assad is safe inside of Moscow, or for Russia to have access to their very crucial Tartus port? And I would say that might be a tough call for Russia. So I'm actually with a 23%. I think it's a 50-50 chance. I'm sort of leaning toward the side they probably won't, but they might be thinking twice about it at this point due to the severity of the situation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to have to say, Matthew, I'm going to have to steal one from the chat here. I got to admit it. Jokes aside, this is serious. And I'd have to, man, that was a great one. I'm not going to lie. That was a great one. But beyond that, I would have to say, Matthew, that I believe the Syrian interim government is looking to get Assad back, al-Assad. Kind of like, you see right here, al-Assad. You know, it's kind of the same as a la mode. You know what I mean?
Kind of like that pie a la mode right there. Look at that.
Man, the Syrian government said, we would like al-Assad transported a la mode. They're going to put like a little dollop of vanilla ice cream on his head when they return him, and then they're also going to, you know, probably execute him like after that. So beyond that, though, all jokes aside about Assad, because, you know, we don't want to be bashful to Bashar, you know what I mean? But nevertheless, I do believe that the Russians are not going to be turning him over. I'm actually going to have to disagree with Matthew here, and we are going to actually go straight to fistfights here on air. I'm just kidding, by the way. But
I'm going
right.
That's right. Is that right?
I'm not going to be talked to like that by a junior minister. But beyond that, I'm going to say I would have to disagree with Matthew on the idea it might be a 50-50, because I still think that the Russians are having to seriously weigh out what kind of a message does this send to the dictators that are aligned with the Russian Federation, because Russia is their top dog. Not really a top dog in the world, but a top dog to their allies, and that's why their allies are friends with them. But if their countries collapse because they follow what Russia wants them to, and then Russia clearly shows with the Assad example that they're more than willing to throw them to the dogs even after they followed Russia's instructions to the letter, this is going to lead a lot of Russia's allies to question whether they should be friends with them or not. And I think for that reason, Russia is still going to hang on to Assad even if it screws them over with getting the rest of their troops out of Syria at this point. It's going to become fairly clear in the future, especially if they hand him over, that allies like Lukashenko may start to realize that if Belarus collapsed because of a military coup, and Belarus had to flee to Russia, who's to say that he would simply just not be given right back to Belarus to face trial and possible execution if that was to happen? And then that makes Lukashenko go, I don't know about joining this war, Putin, because if my military overthrows me, I'm going to, you know, have no one to count on. I can't really count on you because you threw Assad back to the wolves. And I think that's exactly what would happen if Putin did that. And so I think that's most likely what they're also saying within the Russian interior of the government as well. They're saying, look, if we give him back, pretty much everyone else is going to leave us high and dry. I would have to believe. I would have to assume. But still, I hope that does address that well, at least in my point. But there still is a good point to say that there's a 50-50, because at the same time, there possibly could be a route at this point that if they give Assad back, they could try and get the Syrian interim government in their good graces and pretty much return right back to Syria as it is, possibly. So while they might lose some allies, they might not. They still could try and keep Syria within their pocket at that point. But I'm doubting that. I'm largely doubting that. And I do think that we probably will see that the Syrian interim government will not get Assad back, and they largely will withhold the Russians from exiting the port of Tartus and the Syrian interim government as a whole. They may actually start to try and arrest these people and then confiscate the equipment and then deport them, possibly. Because, you know, what else would there be? But anyways, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, in my opinion. But nevertheless, it has been one hell of a night so far in the news. Wouldn't you say, Matthew? I'd have to say, one hell of a night so far.
It's been a hell of a night indeed. Plenty of news from every region around the world, including crazy things like Russia deciding to violate another NATO country's airspace. Plenty of crazy things happening for one day.
And, you know, that's actually about to bring us on into the next piece of news. But before we get on into that, I do have to thank all 10.4 thousand people who were here so far tonight. Y'all joined in. We had a peak of about 10.6 thousand people about 30 minutes ago. And at this point, everyone's pretty much been staying. I got to thank you all so much for watching so far. We still have a lot of news to cover. The battlefield news from Ukraine itself, and also the Polish and German news that we have today on top of that largely pertains directly to the war in Ukraine. But it has been one hell of a news day so far. I just kind of have to take a breather here to talk about that so that we can organize my thoughts for this whole next segment. Because y'all thought that 1 hour long monologue was impressive. Y'all aren't going to believe it, but I largely have to come up with the bullet points of what I'm about to cover and then come up with everything else on the spot. So a little bit of a mentally taxing thing to do on air sometimes. But beyond that, we still have a lot to go. And I got to thank you all so much for watching so far. I hope you all been enjoying it. Before we get on into the next part, just to take a little bit of a breather, let's address a couple of questions, Matthew, and see what folks have got to say.
All right, so jumping into our first Super Chat segment of the night. Our first one is going to go to none other than Hokey Redneck, who puts in a $100 donation. And thank you very much, Hokey, for that support and helping to keep the channel running. And so far, that is the largest Super Chat of the night. So we do appreciate it very much. And Hokey says, Matt needs 5% more in the LLC for what he does. Thank you very much, Hokey, for the vote of confidence for the Matt-sponsored raise. Thank you very much for that, Hokey. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much for putting in that vote of confidence like that. And of course, thank you very much for the support. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the support, Hokey Redneck. We will take that into advisement. And I thank you once again for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running and make it possible. And I just saw, speaking of your support, Hokey Redneck, someone just said, oh, Matthew just deleted them. Matthew, is that supposed to be offensive or something?
Let's see here. Yeah, that's supposed to be offensive because, you know, the rumor was that U.S. aid was paying out money for Ukrainian propaganda. That was the rumor. So I assume that person was calling us some type of Ukrainian propaganda.
How much does U.S. aid pay you? Sadly, nothing. I wish it was something, because the amount of patriotism that we put out on this channel for absolutely free to no charge to the government, and then we still get taxed, it's pretty crazy. We actually pay the government in a weird enough way to be patriotic for them. Unfortunately, we didn't get paid squat by USA. Wish it was the case, but sadly not. Our financial woes would be a lot simpler if that was the case, but instead, I have to go to your mother and get services for free. But nevertheless, they're not tax deductible, unfortunately. But nevertheless, moving on from that, Matthew was caught off guard by that one. Oh man, but moving on from that, we do have to say really quickly that there has been some things that have been going on out there, at least as far as that's been said, because apparently there were things being paid for by USAID that I would have no clue about. I haven't really looked into it much, but you know, we didn't get squat, unfortunately. Wouldn't that be nice if we did? We would be able to make those nice patriotic songs and largely have them paid for by the government instead of directly by my own expense. But nevertheless,
man, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get a drop on that shipment that the USAID sent out a while ago of the like $50 million in condoms or something like that. Like actually trying to intercept the shipments.
Well, not really. But I got to tell you, man, you know someone that would like a lot of that? The Russians. They love putting rubber on vehicles. But moving on from that.
Man, I'm telling you.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. Right now. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. Oh, man. They put out $50 million for condoms. Oh, man, they didn't give me a cent. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Like, it's just something like that. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. A huge thanks to you once again for the support, Hokey Redneck, and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, let's see here. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Adam McLean said, it's pretty cool that these dudes aren't trying to sell super green powder, supplements, or probiotics. Man, I'm telling you, the supplements trade, oh, that's a rough one. Like, you're talking about something that's crazy right there. But let's see. And someone else said, let's see, you can write off some of his business expense. Not really, because that's like a very complicated thing. But anyways, I hope that y'all do enjoy the music, because I put a lot of effort into it, and that's on my mind a lot tonight, because I was trying to work on that a good bit today to get everything organized and sent off to the orchestra. So hopefully soon we will be able to see that the intro will be orchestrated by an actual orchestra, because I know many of y'all are really, really enjoying the intro so far and say that it's great and really patriotic and over the top. And crazily enough, the new 5.5 minutes or so, it's actually, I think, like 5 minutes and 40 seconds of music that we have in the intro has not actually been orchestrated yet. Y'all are actually listening to the rough drafts. Like, those are the first rough drafts that came out, and those are so good I put them in the intro anyways. But here before long, most likely for the time of LSA week, we're going to be putting out the actual orchestrated versions with even newer and better music videos for each and every one of them. I don't know what we're going to do for the LSA song, the LSA anthem, the white and gold, but we're going to try and figure out something for that. But anyways, I hope that y'all are looking forward to that because we've been working on that a lot. And while the documentaries kind of came and went, and Matthew's Greenland video got put out and then mine got canceled, we are going to be putting out music. That I can guarantee. That will be happening, and we'll put out the music videos as well, like we did with the last one. It's just that I gotta say, me personally, I like orchestras more than I like ukulele. Not saying that towards anything directly, but you know, it is what it is, I suppose. Nevertheless, a huge thanks to you once again for support, Hokey Redneck, and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Richard McGurl, who puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Richard, as well for that support and helping to keep the channel running. He said, here's for you guys to keep the lights on and keep it up.
Hey, and thank you so much for helping us to keep them lights on, Richard McGurl. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying this channel and wanting those lights to keep on, because those lights do be staying on, and they aren't really that bright in here, I'm not going to lie. I'm like in a black box right now. No joke, it's just like black soundproofing curtains all around me, on the floor, above me, on all four walls. So I'm literally just sitting in a black box. It's like a sensory deprivation chamber. Some people would say that this is torture. This is my job. Funnily enough, I'm in a sensory deprivation chamber for my job. But nevertheless, I do thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because while everything around me is literally pitch black, there is a light up on the ceiling. So I guess it is like Guantanamo in a sort. But I'm personally fine here. I eat, I sit in the cell, and I work. So pretty happy with it overall. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Richard McGurl, and thank you for being an old guard and a channel legend, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so thank you so much once again. And I just saw, let's see, Thomas asked, is this your main job? Yes, we do YouTube full time. Doing this requires a lot of time and effort. So we spend 24/7 working on the YouTube channel. We're almost always working on something, even if y'all really cannot see it. There's always something going on around the clock for this channel and doing it. So I think we're one of the people, there's a couple, that do this as a full-time job covering world news. I know of a few out there, but we're one of the very few that's actually specialized in doing this full-time. So to answer your question, yes, this is our full-time job right here. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support, Richard McGurl, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the last question of the segment and then get right back on into the news. And also, Tom Exman said, is it drip water? No, actually I have a drip feeder. It's connected to one of the curtains. It's like the ones that are for hamsters. So whenever I get parched, I just go over there and drink out of the drip feeder. Very simple solution, and I also eat pellets. But nevertheless, it is time for us to get on to that final question. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our last one of this segment is going to go to Live Laugh Toaster Bath, who puts in a $31 donation. And thank you very much, Live Laugh Toaster Bath, for that support. And also, by the way, I saw Miss Deesa saying in the live chat, just real quick, and we'll get right back to that super chat. They said, that was Matt's idea, Andrew being in a padded room. Honestly, like, funnily enough, that actually was my idea, to like get those like big old, like, what are they, like soundproofing blankets? We actually like put them like up you know, on the wall and all that stuff to make sure that there's soundproofing there, so that way he's not blaring through the walls because he's super loud back there. So yeah, I actually did put the enforcer in a padded room. That was actually my doings. Kind of interesting. But anyways, back to Live Laugh Toaster Bass, a $31 super chat, and thank you very much for the support, by the way. They said, good evening, enforcers. And don't you think it's funny how the Russian government won't take any responsibility for the damage to these oil facilities, and piss poor as we'd expect? And take one from the chat, please. And LSA.
And I'd have to agree. It is piss poor that the Russian government doesn't take any responsibility for the damage. They largely throw all of it onto the companies themselves, which is a wild thing, but they also do give them favorable loans to be given to them to cover the damages from the Russian central bank, although that's not really happening anymore. But they used to throughout most of the war and throughout the attacks of last year. But it doesn't appear that that's happening this year, and it's pretty wild to see that, because here in the United States, I can promise y'all, here's what would happen if our refineries were hit by drones. Say like the one that I know particularly well, the one down in Baton Rouge. Say that one was hit. oh my lord, the Congress would come together, man, and you'd hear someone go, Mr. Senator, I recommend that we give $2 trillion in the aid package to all oil refineries. And it's like, wait a minute, that one was the only one that was hit. And then everyone would get like $2 trillion. It would be something like that. But over in Russia, you're just on your own. Like, if you're screwed, you're screwed. There is no like bailouts, payouts, or anything like that the government gives in Russia. But that's really because they have no money. So they're kind of like an insurance company at this point that's going on hard times. They're trying to deny every policy at this point, even if there is a claim. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can. It's a fairly sad thing, but we will make sure to get that live chat for you as well. And also make sure to say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die, because it is folks like you who support this channel that make it possible for us to continue to say that phrase, and for the hundreds of thousands of people who follow this channel to say that as well. And so with that, Matthew, take us on into that live chat.
All right, so the live chat question is going to go to Activista, and they said, does the Assad equation change if Putin becomes gone?
That's a good question. It really depends. It really depends on which direction the Russian government would go. And there's two ways that it could head. Not talking about everything breaking apart and all that, just talking about the direction of the Russian central government. It can either go towards a more democratic direction, which is highly unlikely because of the history of administration and governance in the Russian Federation, laid out by almost 1,000 years of specific cultural events that really shaped what Russian governance and administration looks like. Or it could be that a new kind of a dictator takes over with slightly different ideas, but still a dictator nevertheless. And if that is the case, the latter option is the case, then we'll probably see that Assad is never handed over to the Syrians, because they will still have to maintain largely the realm of power that they have at the moment with their allies. And handing over Assad, I believe, would still greatly cheapen their alliance with other countries, because those countries have started to think, if I follow Russia lock in step, and then I'm high and dry, they're not going to be there to help me out after the fact, so I might as well just hop ship now and head somewhere else. That would generally be the issue I think the Russians would face at that point. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But now it's time for us to move on into some more juicy news, because there's a lot of juicy news out there. And also, let's see here. What are some people saying here in the chat? I'm seeing some things. What everyone's talking about Luigi from Mario. I don't know why. I don't know. Let's see.
Oh, my boy, Luigi.
Mamma mia! But anyways, moving on from that, there was some guy actually. They arrested some guy in Altoona, weirdly enough, a while ago in Pennsylvania. And when they arrested him, they said, "You're under arrest." And he said, "Mamma mia!" And then they brought him to New York. I was like, "What the hell's going on here?" But anyways, moving on from that and on into the remainder of our news, we were able to hear that the Germans warned of sabotage today. Should I read this in like a 1940s like newscaster kind of a deal here, because it almost sounds like that with sabotage in it? You know what? I will.
Breaking news. The German Navy chief warns of sabotage and infiltration in the Baltic Sea. German Navy Inspector Jan Christian Koch confirmed sabotage on multiple warships and intrusions at naval bases in the Baltic Sea region. Intruders attempted to access land and sea, while the warship's engine was targeted with metal shavings. I'd have to say, shaving has never been more prevalent in the modern day. Koch warns, we are being tested. Russia's threat is growing, and with a potential NATO conflict from 2029, the Navy is ramping up security and accelerating defense plans. Well, I'd have to tell you that while the German Navy inspector, his last name is Koch, I'd have to say that the real Kochs here are the Russians.
But nevertheless, moving on from that, it does appear that the German naval inspector is saying that the Russians are trying to conduct some forms of covert sabotage on the German patrol fleets that patrol the Baltic from time to time, and he's now seeing that the Federal Republic of Germany needs to take the prudent measures to defend against these kinds of actions by the Russians. But something that was a little bit more overt than that today was the matter of fact that the Russians have conducted the second airspace violation in a matter of days. And we're now hearing that for about over a minute, a Russian military plane violated Poland's airspace over the eastern part of the Bay of Gdansk, formerly called Danzig for some of y'all who may not know what Gdansk is, on Tuesday, according to Polish authorities. This means that that aircraft violated the airspace somewhere around here. most likely. It was for about a minute, not that far from Kaliningrad, but still, it is an airspace violation, and it's one that we certainly will be seeing is going to be repeated by the Russians in the future. This is becoming an incredibly common occurrence over the past few days, and it appears that the Russian Federation is now taking concerted efforts to test NATO airspace and reaction times by NATO countries on the eastern frontier. But moving on from that and out of that little bit of news, it's now time for us to move on into Ukraine itself, because we have loads of news coming out of Ukraine from the front lines of the Ukrainians not only holding the line entirely or also pushing the Russians back. Moving on into that news, we were able to see that the Ukrainians shot down a Shahed with a 70mm APKWS guided missile. And we see them here targeting the Shahed drone. These are actually most likely Garan 2s at this point, which are the license-built variant of the Shahed.
That's an impressive target lock, by the way. That thing's dead on with that thing.
Man, it's just tracking. Man, as they say, we track it. Also, like that, a lot of people got a laugh out of the joke that I made in the German segment. I thank you all for that. I hope it was fun. I hope it sounded good, because I never know what the 1940s newscaster sounds like on air. I have no clue. But oh my lord! To pieces. Your mic cut out, by the way. All I heard was "Dad," and then I heard you out there going. Meh. I was like, oh, "What did he say?" I was like, "What did he say?"
In between the Daffy Duck impersonation, because my mic cut out, I was saying, "Damn, look at that."
Man, all I heard literally do was "Dad," and then I heard you cut off on the mic, and then I heard through the door, because I can't hear you incredibly well. I heard, "Meh," and I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Did you just make a noise?" I was like, "What?" But anyways, moving on from that and out of the air defense news, great to see. It's time for us to get on into the location unknowns, and we were able to see that awards were being issued in the 12th Azov, and we can see that being done right here near to the front. The 12th Azov is somewhere at this moment, either around the area of Seversk or the Severonsky Forest, or it's up near Vovchansk. The exact location was a little bit difficult to locate at this point. The last time we heard about them in video and picture evidence, they were in the Severonsky Forest, but there's now been reports that they may be in the Vovchansk area. That's why this fell on the location unknowns. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Ukrainian APC evacuating the wounded as Saving Private Ryan music plays over the clip. We'll have to mute that. But we can see here the APC ripping its way down the road, kicking up dust because it must. And as the artillery rains down, they say, "Do you smell that musk?" And it appears that it is just nothing more than some dust. I'm making all of it rhyme here. Also, the Russians are trying to obliterate this APC, and it just keeps trucking. Not getting hit. Every single shot's missing. And we can see here that they keep making it through. They're still unscathed, crazily enough.
Tough crowd. You mentioned something about a little musky. I was like, oh, I remember that.
Man, I gotta tell you. Yep, anyways, someone in the live chat said, "Oh, you drink, that's why you're so aggressive." I don't know what that comment's directed at. Like,
I don't either. I literally asked him, I said, "Are you all right?" I'm like, who the hell's he talking to, man? I thought maybe for a minute he was talking to somebody else in the live chat. Dude,
I didn't know. I saw that and I was like, I don't know what that means. I was like, are you talking to me? It's like, I'm not aggressive. I'm calm. But moving on from that, we also got to see the Ukrainians taking down an enemy. Well, actually, the Russians taking down an enemy drone. Of course, the Russian Federation, glorious and great, invincible and legendary, or as they say it in Russian, nekrasnoshimnaya I legendaria. They shot down a Ukrainian drone, and they showed it off to their commander, the big guy right here with the gut. And he's about to go look at it. Check it out. You can see the Luftwaffe, well, actually the German cross from the Second World War on the wing. And you can also see a Ukrainian flag on it over there. What a catch!
That looks unusual.
Now, the commander looks like he's not really certain about this one. And that's because... Huh?
Kevin Spacey, is that him?
Yeah, Kevin Spacey's looking a little uncertain about it, kind of like that time he got pulled over that stop sign. But one thing that's the reason why he's looking a little uncertain about this drone is because it's not Ukrainian. The Russians shot down their own drone. It's actually and I'll get it for y'all here, an Aileron 3. You can see one right there, almost with the same camouflage scheme and everything. You can actually see the vertical stabilizers here in this picture are the ones on the back of the wings. Let's see here. Right there. It's literally a Russian drone. So what happened is that the Russians took down their own drone, knew it was a Russian drone made by the Aileron company, and so what they did is that they painted on a German cross on one wing and then put a Ukrainian flag sticker on the other and then hung it up in the bunker so that way when the commander came by, they could go, look, bled, we took out the Ukrainian drone. Those bastards were spying on our position. And the truth is that they shot down their own drone. And these are fairly rare at this point. They're just being introduced. And that may be why it was shot down in an instant of friendly fire. Because beyond that, I just couldn't explain why the hell they would parade their own drone like it's a trophy and claim it's Ukrainian. This is actually a Russian drone all the way.
That took a lot of creative effort for those Ruskies to like really paint the Ukrainian flag on there and the Iron Cross or whatever that is over there. Like, you can tell it took a lot of effort because it's all like offset and off-canted and stuff like that. The Ukrainian flag looks like a 5-year-old did it. It's just a real like it doesn't even match the paint job on the thing.
Yeah, dude, and look at the commander, man, after he looks at it. Rutro raggy. He knows it's one of their drones and he's trying to play it off. He's like, see, look at the just saw a drone.
Well, he's getting thrashed around in the background. Do you hear all that ruckus?
Dude, that's the commander choking out the guy that actually took out the drone. he's just choking him out. You're hearing him struggling in the background. He's like, look at this shitty Balkan rules we painted onto the wing. I mean, it proves it's Ukrainian, right? Like, so now the commander's just playing along. He's like, yes, it's from the wicked fascists of Ukraine. Very good job, very good job. And he probably knows it's also a Russian drone as well. But just a pitiful thing all around. They know what it is, and they're going to lie about it because it would look worse to admit that they shot down their own drone. But moving on from that, enough of that business. It's time to get into how many Russians were lost today. Anyone want to take bets? Holy moly!
Holy cow. Only one Bobcat, though, again. Look at that, man. That's crazy, though. The Bobcat losses are staying consistently low these days. They must have knocked out all of them at this point or something because they're barely rising. But it looks like Ms. Deesa's got a breakdown for us, too. We want to take a look at that.
Man, Ms. Deesa, keeper of the records, put down an amazing count today. The troop losses rise, but 7-day average is below 1,300. Other categories are at or above averages. 132 drones is the 6th highest daily loss, and 169 vehicles is the 6th highest daily loss as well. Everything was lining up to be 6s today, which is absolutely 6y. See what I did there? But moving on from that and into the loss report, we were able to hear that 1,390 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, most likely including some Norks as well. 31 APCs were also knocked out, along with 169 nice supply trucks over the past 24 hours, along with 13 main battle tanks, 44 artillery pieces, 132 drones, 2 MLRSs, 2 cruise missiles, 1 anti-aircraft system, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. All in all, the day was good. And the Russians, they suffered aplenty. Now, let's get on to where they were suffering at, and that's on the front lines itself. Moving us on directly into the area around Saratov, we were able to see that a couple of Russian SPGs were taken. Oh, we got Christmas music playing over it. It's the season of giving. The Ukrainians are giving out beatings. And we can see here the Russians wandering around and looking at the devastation of their own artillery positions, as it appears that a Nona and a Mr. S were both wiped out in this area.
Look at this. It's just mayhem around here. All these logs laying around and stuff. Look at that.
Whoa. Well, look at that explosion.
Whoa.
Oh, and there's the Mista.
Look at that. Oh, a freaking like piece of scrap metal. Look at that turret.
Whoa. Look at that hull. Well, I mean, we don't have an Ivan Strelkov around here, but whoa, standards dropping.
You see, this right here was once at one time a really good piece of equipment, but now it's just roadkill. And if I can try to stuff it in the trunk, and then that's probably the best thing that could happen for it.
those Russian artillerists wouldn't have died if they had eaten some fries with some tallow on them. Something like that.
That's the tallow. If you have a little extra tallow, I'm probably a lot less, sallow or something.
It's not the problem that people are eating freaking fried potatoes and shoving them down their throats. The problem is the grease, damn it. It's the grease.
Oh, that grease, I'm telling you.
Man, listen, man, I don't have a degrease in nutrition, but I have to say that eating too many french fries, whether it's tallow or not, probably ain't good for your health. You know what I mean? But moving on from that and into the Seversk area, we were able to see the Ukrainians repelling a Russian assault in this direction. Whoa, and also dropping beats. Not only were they dropping Russians, they were dropping them dubstep beats. And there goes the Russians right there. Oh, and one of them just touchdown.
My.
Touchdown. Holy moly. Man, call the Ukrainians the Eagles because they're slamming touchdowns. Holy moly. And there goes another. Whoa. Moving on from that, we can see another
Did
Ukrainian.
You see that guy throwing the gritty? He was doing the gritty. The other guy was walking down the street way back near the beginning of the video. He was like doing the gritty and everything.
Let's see, which one here?
Look at there he is right there. Look at him.
This guy?
He's doing the gritty.
Yeah, dude. He just sit there walking down the street in my 6'4", like he's hitting the gritty.
He's doing the gritty. Man, he's got that floss down pat. He was doing the footwork and everything. Look at him. Look at him.
Look at this here. Certified freak.
Watch.
7 days a week. Look at
He's throwing it down, man. I've never seen footwork like that from anybody, like even intentionally trying to dance or something like that. That was impeccable.
Dude, he said, I might die, but I'm going to drop my sickest beat so far. Never going to give you up. Never going to let you down.
honestly, man, if you ever sent the Crips to war, that was what they'd be doing. They're literally going and Crip walking right into the battle.
Dude, if that guy legitimately was doing that and the Ukrainians were the Crips, they would have stopped the drone and they would have turned on a speaker and gone, damn, G, I didn't know you would chill like that. And then the drone would have flown away. It's like they wouldn't even attack him at that point. But anyways.
Oh, man. Turn on that. Wait a minute. Go back to it for a second. One more time. Let's do one more replay.
Man, my boy here.
Okay. So play it now. Zelensky. There he goes.
Mustard on the beat. Anyways, moving on from that. And on to our next clip, we also get to see them taking out some drones. And also, Monster Life said, LOL, hate that song. I don't really like any modern songs, so whenever I talk about them, I'm talking about them in absolute jest. Like, I don't like any of them. But we can see the Ukrainian drones knocking them out. Oh! You know, Matthew, that Simon Pegg must have been operating that drone. He said, your dancing has no rhythm, no talent, and my face is filled with plastic. I give you a 0. You know, something like that. It's like...
Also, that's not Simon Pegg, by the way. It's Simon Cowell.
Simon, I don't know. I don't know any of them.
The other guy was the guy on Star Trek, man. That's not the same guy.
Oh, well, now I know. I didn't know. I mean, what was I supposed to know? I mean, I don't know. But yeah, you're right. It's Simon Whistling or something like that. But moving on from that and down the lines. But have you seen that guy lately? It looks like he got stung by a bee. I don't know what happened to him. But
Simon Cowell, yeah, I've seen that, man. His face is like swollen up like a watermelon.
Oh my goodness. Looks like he got stung or something. It's like, are you Sting now? Is that what you're going to change your name to? You're going to be called Sting because you look like it. I mean, it's like, next thing you know, we're going to get a clapback from him on Twitter. He's going to be like, I might be looking like a bee, but you look like a potato right now. And I'd be like, well, that's fair. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see the Russians getting blasted by the 1st Tank Brigade. Check this out. And let's see here. Oh yeah, Simon Pegg is that guy who did the Hot Fuzz and the Shaun of the Dead and everything. Yeah, he is funny. I think he's a funny guy. But let's see here. We can see the Russians getting pelted at this point. And you see the Ukrainians just slamming the Russian trenches.
Just slamming them. Look at that.
I guess you could say that they have those Explosive charges. Here is why Ukrainian high explosive is the best in the world.
The best in the world.
And a lot of people, a lot of Hot Fuzz fans. Crazily enough, y'all wouldn't believe this. I looked into the whole Hot Fuzz thing. Apparently, they thought it was going to flop. So they thought it was a straight to DVD kind of a thing, and it ended up being a really big success for them. So that's pretty cool. And Redeus Minecraft said, "Oh God, no British accents, please." I'm sorry, Redeus. I'm sorry, but we must. We must do it for you. We must do it to them, governor. Like a brummy. but moving on from that, you see them continuing to slam those Russian positions. The Ukrainian tanks, they offer no mercy, no shelter. And oh, that Russian position toasted. You know something that Subway and the Ukrainians have in common, Matthew?
What's that?
They both ask, "Would you like it toasted?"
Oh, and they just keep saying more. Put it in again. More.
Put it in again. Put it in
More.
again. Dude, it's literally just
Have you seen that
carbon.
video where the guy keeps having them like put the Subway thing into the oven or whatever, and it gets in there and gets so hot that literally it catches on fire and burns like in the toaster and stuff? Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it was actually real. Like they kept putting it in there, and the whole thing caught on fire. The tomatoes, the bread, and everything just burned.
Oh my God. Why the hell would they keep doing that? Wouldn't they be like, "No, man, this thing's about to catch on fire. I don't think I could do it."
Oh no, the worker was chill.
Oh, he was chill like that. Like, that's respectable.
Yeah. He was willing to burn down the whole store for the customer's request.
Dude, he said, "Doing it for the vine." And he put it right in there and it caught on fire.
Basically, yeah.
Respectfully. But moving on from that and down towards Chasiv Yar, we also get to see some of the damage to the town. Once again, heavily damaged. We've seen this for a good while at this point, for about a year, as the Ukrainians have been holding her down. And the Russians, no matter how much they try and level Chasiv Yar, just cannot take it. And we see the drone getting a good bird's eye view of Chasiv Yar. Sales Master Metal said, "In Russia, it's a privilege to be toasted. It means you're well-traveled to some tropical place like Thailand." Interesting. I remember that one Russian guy went on a trip to Egypt and a shark mauled him. Like, and that was like a year ago or something. It's like, was he toasted or was he toast? That's the real question here.
I've never heard of a shark mauling. Is that when the shark like gets up on shore and walks up like Jabberjaw and goes and like rips him from limb to limb like a bear?
Man, yeah, that's exactly what happens, man. The shark gets up there and goes, "Call this a meal, because I'm going to be eating." And then it just mauls him or something like that, like a dog.
Man, I gotta tell you what, if a shark walked up to me on his back fins and stuff like that and was going I'd be like, "Go ahead and chew me up right now. I can't handle that sound anymore. Just go ahead and chew me up."
It's like, isn't that the same sound that Curly, not Curly, what the hell was the guy's name that did that in the three, Mo, yeah, wasn't that the same thing that Mo did in the Three Stooges? Like, is that shark just the Mo of the sea?
Yeah, it could be. It could be one of the Stooges.
It's like Chicken of the Sea. It's the Mo of the Sea. Like, dude, someone ought to open up a brand called that. Like, that would be a good idea. You know, like, just sell chicken or something like that, called the Mo of the Sea or something. I don't know. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see that the Russians were being taken out with demolition charges. And, oh, buddy. Oh, they were really giving it to them. Check this out. The Ukrainians, they pull up in their whip.
Everybody's saying it was Curly. I didn't really watch the Three Stooges, so I'm just taking a stab at it. I thought Mo sounded like a good one. Let me say that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I never really, you know, specifically cared for the Three Stooges that much. I was more of a Buster Keaton kind of a guy. But we can see that the Ukrainians got him with the charges. Holy moly, the charges stuck. But moving on from that, kind of like those charges stuck on Diddy. Oh, but moving on from that, and on to our next clip, we got to see the police holding the line.
I'm putting some of that reflective beats on here.
Man, they're putting some of those 1980s documentary beats, like where they're like, let me just unmute that for just like 2 seconds. What is the human body made of? You know, and then it's like, it's 80% water. It's like, that's the music that would play in the background of those documentaries.
It really is. Also, folks, sorry about the glitches in the audio tonight, by the way. I don't know why it's happening, but apparently I think it's a YouTube server side issue because it seems to be that a lot of people will fix the issue when they refresh their YouTube screen. So maybe it's a side of their things or something like that. I'm not sure, but hopefully it gets fixed.
We had a massive lag spike in the countdown to the show that I couldn't even explain because the computer was connected to the internet perfectly fine, running incredibly well. And then OBS just throttled itself, and I didn't know what was up with that. The computer's been running fine since like that whole fan overload happened. Everything's been running optimally, so I don't really know what's going on with that. But moving on from that, we also get to see the Ukrainians' flag flying in Tarets, off at the top of some mining machinery. Someone got banned for trying to get us to do the classic. That ain't happening again. Like, that ain't happening again, pal.
Man, they had to go. I saw that. I was like, hell no, not again. You got to go, buddy.
You think I'm going to call out your brother? Absolutely not. And we can see the Ukrainian flag just flying in the breeze up there. Wonderful to see. Moving on from that, and out of that little bit of news right there in Tarets, as they continue to hold it down, we also get to see down near the area of Sokol that it appears that a T-90M was stoken, and we can see that right here. This is a T-90M covered in a cope cage, and it's about to become a pressure cooker. Check it out. Kaboom. And in a second here, any second now, whoosh, and there goes the pressure cooker.
Whoosh.
It's extra crispy. With a crispy kernel. You know, if a colonel was the commander of that tank, it truly would be a crispy colonel. But anyways, moving on from that clip and out of that little bit of news, it's now time for us to move on and down towards the area where the Ukrainians are making some advances. The Ukrainians retook Pischane today. That's right, the 425th Assault Regiment took positions up in Pischane, pushing the Russians back and giving them a piece of their medicine. Well, you see the Russians have been spotted. And the bomblets are dropping. Oh my lord, it looks like something bigger may have been dropped right there.
Jeez.
Whoa, look at that boiler. And the Ukrainians are now laying down some heat. Ooh, I don't know what happened right there, but something explosive happened. Someone said, now I want KFC. And they're not even sponsoring us. Ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous.
Could we please have some KFC?
Man. I don't know, can you?
Eh? KFC? The colonel said, could I have the 13 bombs and igniters, please?
Man, you know something that Colonel Sanders liked cooking more than chicken?
He liked throwing hands.
Commies. He cooked commies.
I remember Colonel Sanders. He was a wild man. He would cook the chicken 1 minute, next minute he'd be with the frying pan smacking people.
Man, I think Colonel Sanders actually killed someone at some point in his life, right? Like I think he legitimately did. Wait, let me go pull that up. Did Colonel Sanders kill someone? Why in the world was the main search result kill you? What the hell's going on with that? Look at this. Did Colonel Sanders kill you? No. It's like, I'm here.
Really, we wouldn't be searching that if that was the case.
What? What? No way! He hit someone and killed him?
Wait a minute. Let's see. Let's see.
This is from Fox 56, so it says from 2023. What the hell? He hit Robert Gibson, one of the shell managers, killing him.
Wait a minute, this was recent? It says July 15th, 2023.
No. Well, no, this is the 5 things you may not know about KFC Colonel Sanders. Like, it's written in 2023, but Colonel Sanders has been dead for decades. Like, he didn't just do that.
What did Colonel Sanders get resurrected to come back and start popping cabs on people? What the hell's going on?
Man, he said, I'm not here to fry chicken anymore. I'm here to fry bitches. And then they start going around just doing stuff like that. But I had always heard that he did end up killing someone. I didn't know that he actually ended up killing a shell manager.
Scroll down for a second. Let's see. It's an article on Medium right there. It says KFC's Colonel Sanders once got a business rival. I don't know. Like, Also, look at the start of the article. It says, before he found success with 11 herbs and spices, he once shot a business rifle.
Man,
This guy was crazy.
Before he found success with 11 herbs and spices, he was handing out 11 bullets. He was handing out 11 bullets and ass weapons. It's like man, Colonel Sanders said, "Are you afraid of meeting God?" It's like the man. It's like, dude, Colonel Sanders. He wasn't out there just always being the nicest of guys. Apparently, he was out there slinging lead at some point. But one thing that is cool about him is that he's a steam engine stoker. So that the way to tie trains into this whole thing. But yes, he did end up killing someone. So like, what a wild thing. Also, by the way, if y'all didn't know, he actually hated KFC after he sold it. Like he said that it was slop. Like you can see it right there. And I've seen him, like, he was on a talk show one time, and they were like, "Do you like KFC?" He was like, "No, I hate it." I was like, "What?" I was like, "Wait a minute, you made it." But the real KFC nowadays actually doesn't follow most of his original recipes, if y'all do not know. So, you know, that's kind of a fun fact, but, you know, not really fun for him, I guess. But, yeah, this guy was a baller. No joke. Anyways, moving on from that. Wait a minute, hang on.
Oh, he married a woman from Alabama. I didn't know that.
He moved to Sheffield?
Oh, Colonel Sanders lived in Alabama?
Dude, he lived in Sheffield. What? Dude, no way. Let's go look at that. Dude, right up here in Muscle Shoals.
Man, he was living in the nice area.
Dude, honestly, this place is respectable. Like, if y'all have ever been to this area of Alabama, Muscle Shoals is a pretty nice place. Not bad. But that's crazy. He lived up there. That's wild, dude. Like, there's like a really nice hotel up here near some dam. Oh, look, there's a TVA power station. The hydro plant. Yeah, look at that. And there's the dam. And there should be a hotel. Yeah, the Marriott Shoals Hotel and Spa. If y'all ever seen a hotel, it's this one right here. It's actually pretty nice. It's like in the middle of nowhere in Alabama as well. It's just the weirdest thing. And it overlooks the dam. So if you get like a high enough floor, and they also have a restaurant up there in that tower. I think
I've never understood why this even exists, to be honest. Like, it's just like the town really doesn't support something like that.
No, it doesn't, but you do get a good view of that dam, and I be damned. That is a fine piece of Alabama dam engineering right there. I be damned.
Very nice.
Man, call me the Tennessee River because I be damned. Oh, but moving on to that, and out of that little side note, still, Colonel Sanders was out there slinging lead before he was slinging herbs and spices. But moving on from that, it is time for us to move on into our next little piece of news, where we got to see a Russian Mista getting misted by some Ukrainian drones. There's the aftermath of it, but here's the beforehand, the before math. My favorite part, because I'm terrible at math. Man, you know, when he was beating that guy with a crowbar, he was getting the idea of the 11 herbs and spices. He was like, "I got an idea," or something like that.
It's getting a little spicy up in here, you know? Come on, man.
And also, Monster Lab is saying that the chat's asking for more KFC history. We might get into that in the question segment, but I want to make sure that we can get it through our news right now, so that we can spend more time kind of like goofing off in the question segment with all of y'all, because that's always a blast. But we see the Ukrainian drone lining her up and getting ready to take some pieces. Reese's Pieces.
Someone said, I wallpapered my house using KFC mashed potatoes. You might be able to, honestly. Like, the mashed potatoes are good, but they're a little thick.
Man, dude, those things are so thick, you could roll it up into a ball and do some damage if you threw that at someone. Like, I think. Like, I wouldn't doubt it. Oh, right on the barrel. Dang. Look at that.
Also, someone said it wasn't Sanders that shot the guy, it was his rival. I don't know at this point. Like, at this point, I'm not really sure. I had heard, like, through the grapevine, and also I think I had heard on, like, a documentary somewhere that there was a gunfight between him and somebody, but I can't remember for certain, so I don't know, but there was some gunslinging going on somewhere.
Man, Colonel Sanders was like, "Someone's messing with my gas station. I'm going to take the easy way." Oh, my God. Like, it was something like this.
I think I saw a documentary like I don't know if it was the History Channel or where, it was like they reenacted like a whole scene, like where he's at his gas station, he's being messed with or something, and he had like gone and confronted the people. I don't know if he confronted them with a gun or what, but it was a whole showdown.
Man, so people came up to his gas station. Excuse me, Do you sell gas? What kind of gas? It's like, just car gas. So I just need to fill up. Oh, well, why didn't you say so? And then he puts the gun away and then goes and fills up the car. Man, what a legend.
Do you remember that, or am I mixing it up?
I don't think I saw that documentary, but I don't think you're mixing it up.
I don't know if I'm getting mixed up or not at this point. I can't remember between all the History Channel documentaries if I'm mixing him up with somebody else or what. But somebody did something. That's all I know. That's as vague as it's going to be.
Also, I'm not having anyone say anything positive about Popeyes in this chat. I almost died on one of their biscuits one time, and after that, I've never eaten there again. Those biscuits are the driest damn things. You could give that to the Royal Navy back in the 1800s, and they would have thought it was hardtack. Like Popeyes biscuits, they will kill you if you don't have something to drink. Like, no joke. Those things are weapons. Like, I think honestly, if someone dies choking to death on a Popeyes biscuit, that ought to count as manslaughter, like, or something, because you have to intentionally make those biscuits that damn dry every time, to be that horrendous. Like, yes, the sandwiches are all right, but those biscuits scared me away, like, way back in the day when I was, like, a kid, like 12. I ate one of those biscuits, choked on them in the back of the car, and then I spit up the entire chunk I was choking on. And I was like, I'm never eating a Popeyes biscuit ever again. I'm not going to Popeyes ever again. Because I was coughing so hard, my eyes were popping out. Call me Popeye. But anyways, moving on from that and down to Velika Novoselka, we did get to see some Russians being captured down in this area. Here's one of them.
Где тебя взяли в плен? Где ты сдался? Район Нового Комара. Тебя как забирали? Забирали и 300-х наших, да? И сразу забрали тебя. То есть тебя как пленного там не оставили. Во время того, как ты находился с пацанами на позиции, когда тебя уже непосредственно взяли в плен, какое было до тебя отношение?
Оказали материальную.
Но материальную помощь они тебе не могли оказать?
Не, они покушать дали, и покурить, и воды дали.
Все, то есть к тебе относились нормально?
Да, пока я до того дошел.
Sharlock said in the live chat, damn, Ben Stiller's looking rough. He hasn't been having a great time. I didn't, we'll leave that one out.
Было двое зайти на опорный пункт, да? Ты принял решение, что, оно тебе не надо. Это, так или просто не обманывал? Так? Да.
Так оно и так. Пацана потеряли. Я как смог выжить, и вот они даже меня не искали.
Я понял. Саш, ты молодец, потому что это твой выбор. Ты решил сохранить себе жизнь. Я надеюсь, что ты к нам больше не попадешь. То есть...
Christopher King said, you don't go to Popeyes for the biscuits, my guy. Well, I didn't go there to almost die on one. That's my 2 cents on that one. Like, maybe it's good. I don't know. I heard people shoot and kill each other for some of the sandwiches. But I'm just personally never been that big of a fan.
I feel like if you were looking this guy in the eyes or something like that, you'd be a little confused about who you're speaking to.
I would also say I didn't know that we would run into one of the missing Tate brothers out here near Velika Novoselka. This guy is saying, what color is your vodka? Or something like, mine's yellow, a premium brand. Uncle Sam, you were correct. Publix has great fried chicken. It's just that it's cooked Mr. George's way, so it can never be wrong. Because Mr. George is the greatest and best of us all. He truly was the prototype who made us all and brought us into being. It was not the good Lord above, or was it just natural evolution, as some people would like to call it? No, Mr. George, in his benevolent hand, created the world, and not only that, he blessed us all with his greatest creation, Publix. For all of us Southerners who are scared to go into Walmart because you might get stabbed. But moving on, I'll be entirely honest with y'all. I still go to Walmart. I'm not going in getting ripped off by Publix. I'm just putting that out there. But the chicken is good. But moving on from that, it's now time for us to get on up to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1084 of the war. And that ain't the right speech. It's time for us to get to this one, which is the speech from today. Same setting, same background, same everything. So, without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
І українці, українки, сьогодні передусім я хочу подякувати всім нашим захисникам неба, кожному підрозділу, кожному воїну, які захищають Україну від російських ракет та дронів. Сьогодні був черговий удар по нашій енергетиці, майже 20 російських ракет, в тому числі балістичних, та ще майже 125 дронів різних типів. Значну частину збито, особливо відзначу мобільні вогневі групи 302-ї, зенітно-ракетної Харківської бригади. Молодці воїни, дякую. І також я вдячний всім нашим вертолітникам Сил оборони, які фактично щоночі в надзвичайно складних умовах забезпечують результат у збитті шахедів. І це вертолітники сухопутних військ, повітряних сил, військово-морських сил, прикордонників, всім в наших силах оборони і безпеки України, хто здійснює захист неба і хто дотичний, хто допомагає, всім дякую. Будемо і на цьому тижні, і наступного тижня ми будемо говорити з партнерами щодо більших спроможностей наших ППО, всього захисту неба. Кожна можливість, яка є у світі, кожен потенційний контракт, який може зміцнити Україну, на все це звертаємо увагу та максимально швидко ми працюємо. Важливо сказати сьогодні також про українську енергетичну безпеку. Важливий день. Верховна Рада України зробила суттєвий крок. Україна зможе добудувати ще 2 енергоблоки на Хмельницькій атомній станції. Це більше 2 гігават електрики для України. Щоб було зрозуміло, зараз цими складними зимовими місяцями ми можемо імпортувати в Україну від наших сусідів приблизно такий обсяг електрики. Наші добудовані енергоблоки дозволять Україні навіть в зимові місяці йти без імпорту. І обов'язково це допоможе нам стримувати зростання цін на електрику для людей. І навіть щодо спеціальних економічних проєктів з нашими партнерами, зі Сполученими Штатами, з президентом Трампом, щодо спеціальних ресурсів України, видобутку та переробки, Україна тепер зможе говорити більш впевнено, маючи в майбутньому додаткове і значне джерело електрики. Промислове зростання і розвиток будь-якої економіки мають базуватись в сучасному світі на розвитку енергетичних джерел. І саме це і робимо. Звичайно, є голоси, які критикують, але це ті голоси, яким дешева енергія в Україні просто невигідна. Вони свою кишеню або тих, від кого залежить, наповнюють від дорожчої енергії, ніж атомна. Є всі ці цифри. Так. І кожен може побачити та переконатись. Я вдячний депутатам, які зараз підтримали енергетичну незалежність і промисловий розвиток України. Вже готові до зустрічі з представниками Сполучених Штатів і найближчим часом перемовини на багатьох рівнях. І на завтра я призначив засідання РНБО. Кілька питань. Будемо робити дешевше ліки в українських аптеках. Це важливо. І продовжимо захищати нашу державу санкціями. Я вдячний всім, хто з Україною. Слава Україні!
And Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that is moving us on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy howdy, what a segment again. And as another bot comes in, he is asking for more money again? Like a war isn't going on for another day again? Ban that man! Boom! And he's gone. But nevertheless, it is time for us to get on into that second segment. And buddy, what a fun one it is. We get to talk about anything. And starting us off on a good note, someone asked, do you have Church's chicken? The answer is no. We used to have Church's chicken here in this great state of Alabama. The one I know of used to be in Montgomery, Alabama. And, Matthew, where was it? Do you remember where it was?
It was in front of the Sam's Club there, right off the interstate on near, I think it's Vaughn Road, I think. Go look down there. You should see it. It's near, yeah, it's in front of the Sam's Club.
Yeah.
It's right over here somewhere. It was like, I think they actually knocked down the building. No, you're going the wrong way. Go back the other way.
Going the wrong way.
So right there, right before you, you
There it
went too
is.
far. Oh, no, no, I don't think that was it.
No,
Hey,
wait,
go
that
back
was a
over.
motel.
Go back over the interstate. Go back over. Back over just a little bit.
Okay, all right.
In front of Sam's Club.
Okay, all right, all right.
It was somewhere over there next to that Toyota place, because the Toyota place was not there the entire time, and it was like somewhere on that lot was Church's Chicken right there, and it was kind of sketchy the whole time. It was always a little bit shady. It was like some sort of like bad folks hung around there that were up to some bad activities. But they had the Church's Chicken around this spot right here, and I don't think we ever actually ate there, but it was somewhere right there before Toyota knocked it down and started building their place.
Yeah, I remember that they closed that because there was like shootings going on in Church's Chicken. I mean, a lot of people were having to go to church in caskets after they went to Church's Chicken here in Montgomery. So they shut it down because it started running a business away from Church's Chicken. No one wanted to get shot and killed going in there. And then this building right here, which is no longer a restaurant, it's something completely different. Every single restaurant that ever popped up in that building before it turned into a gas station, it seems at this point, maybe, was some sort of a front of a kind for like the gangs in the city. Like, remember that, Matthew? Like, it was a steakhouse one time. Boom. Turns out the whole thing was a front for them to like handle drug money or something like that. Like, it was like every single time that restaurant reopened under a different name, that always happened. I remember that one. That was always.
I don't recall. I don't recall if that was the reason why they kept shutting down or not. I think you might be getting confused with another place.
No, I remember. I feel like it was exclusively this one. Let me go see if I can drop us down near the building here. You got to remember this, right? Remember it was.
They even have they have the old signs still
Yeah.
up with the new place. No, I don't think it was anything like that. I think you're getting mixed up with a different one. The place here just kept failing over and over because it simply wasn't popular, and every place that moved in here like never fixed the building up, and they just left it the same like facade on the outside. Nobody wanted to eat there. But I'll be honest with you, man. Like even looking at this on Google Maps again. Just brings back horrible memories, to be perfectly honest with you, just looking at this place. This I'm not gonna lie, folks. Like, I know there's probably some people in the chat that's like gone to Montgomery or lived in Montgomery. I hated living in Montgomery, Alabama. It was awful. Montgomery was always dangerous, a lot of crime, and it was just kind of just meh, like just bland. It was just existed. It was always hot as hell, and it was just meh. Like, I just didn't like it.
Also, man, this building has gone through like 5,000 different owners. Those AC units, by the way, are rusted over back there. And then you just still got the Lone Star Steakhouse. I like how over the years, though, the letters keep falling off of the sign. Like in 2019, which is this view, it was Lone Star U. And now it's Lone Star 2.
Man, I just like this is crazy. Like honestly, man, looking at this stuff right here, I just can't even explain like the feelings about looking at this place like this on Google Maps again. It's been a minute since I've seen it.
Dude, and the sky has like that look. Like, I don't know what it is, man, but the sky has like a different look down in Montgomery. I don't know what it is, but it's, oh my God, this place is horrendous. Like, it's just so bad. Shootings would happen so often down here. They happen more now than ever. It's a very dangerous town to be in. A lot of people call it like the let's see what some people call it, the Baghdad of Montgomery. Some other names, the Detroit of Montgomery. Montgomery, Alabama is pretty bad. It's an unsung jewel of the state in terms of the crime rate. I would honestly say I think Montgomery these days is giving Birmingham a run for its money, and downtown Birmingham is very questionable. So, you know, that's something to remember right there. But man, Montgomery is a trip. Not a good one. I would never recommend to go down there. And they also had the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts, which you would think it would have fine arts in it. It honestly was garbage. Like, we went there before once and never went again. Like, it was just this.
Yeah, I never really understood what they really even had in here. I remember I went in here one time and I can't remember like to save my life what was in it. Oh look, that's Hot Dog Man. What's he doing on the wall?
Throwing up gang signs as well.
I don't know what gang sign that would be, but it's looking a little sus.
Man.
got the pose down and everything too.
Man, I'm telling you, let's see here. What else do we have? Let me take this off screen so that way I can select them just in case there's, you know, some of that art, you know what I mean? Let's see here. Hang on. Let me take a gander. There's some more good stuff in here. I can promise you all that. Also, I don't know what the hell this is. This looks like something that'd be out in front of a gentleman's club. Dr. Imperial's Tree of Knowledge. I don't even know what the hell that is. Doesn't look like it should be an art museum. We got the clown throwing up gang signs again. So honestly, what the hell are these?
I don't even know. It looks I just don't know, man. I don't know what the deal is. Like this type of stuff right here that Montgomery like has in it and stuff like that. I don't even know like what to explain it. It's just like it's just so dry. I don't even know how to explain it.
Dude, this is how I sound every time I'm on air. That's why we have the soundproofing blankets around me. You know, something like that. It's like, man, but the building's neat. Like, this place is neat. But then you can go right across the way to the Alabama Shakespeare Festival and really get your socks blown off by the rotting carpet that's in that building because they don't maintain it hardly at all. I remember the last, like, few months we were here, we went and watched a play. It was Hamlet. And they had 3 actors, and the 3 actors were doing like 30 parts, which just made that so difficult to follow. It was just impossible to even know what was going on. So then we left. But this is what the inside looks like.
Interesting.
And that's the inside as well. I remember that. I remember when I was in Montgomery, I tried to get a job here because I simply didn't want to get shivved at another job. And they turned me down because they said I wasn't Shakespeare material. Now look at me. it's like, now look at me. Now I'm in front of y'all. There's 7.2 thousand people here, which is more of an audience and viewership than they ever get. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy?
You know, it's funny. It's funny they turned you down to work here. Was actually know somebody that actually was friends with that actually works here. And I'll be honest with you, like a good friend and everything like that. But I mean, you know, kind of interesting. They're like, you weren't Shakespeare material, but my friend was. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it's like I wasn't even wanting to be a part of the cast or nothing. I was like, I'm good on that. Like, I'm just not a fan of that kind of a thing. What I was wanting to do is literally just work at the front, you know, and process people in and, you know, their tickets and things. Wasn't like I was saying, you know, I'm the next, you know, what would be a famous actor? Tom Cruise? I wasn't saying anything like that. I was just wanting a job, like a minimum wage job at the front. And they were like, yeah, we don't think you're material for here. I'm like, what the hell do you mean? Have you looked around? It's like, this is Montgomery. It's like, there is no material here. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? So, you know, I remember that. But let's see. And also, it's always a tower of something blasters. Oh my God. Oh yeah, you know, that's par for the course down here. But let's see here. Oh yeah, this is the neatest thing in the town, in my opinion, is this bridge. That bridge. That was always the coolest thing to me in Montgomery.
Yeah, it really was. Oh man, I can't even tell you. Like for some reason, looking at these pictures today and looking at this place is just like freaking sinking me for some reason. I don't even know why.
They replaced the wood, dude. They replaced the
They
wood.
put like stone there.
That looks terrible. The wood was better. Like when you drove over the wood, it would go click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, and it was really neat. Now they replaced it with the pavers. You don't even. This bridge sucks. I hate the bridge. It's just lame. No one needs to go down there and look at it. That's terrible. What the dude? They suck the joy out of everything here in the state, and we'll build another prison on top of it too. It just makes no sense at all. But yeah. Oh, y'all want to go see the governor's mansion? Like, I know we haven't even gotten to the poll, but I want to go show y'all the governor's mansion. So here it is. Let me drop y'all down up in there. So this is the governor's mansion here in Montgomery. It's not that bad, is it? But
it's the governor.
But right down the way, I'd say like 3 blocks down, the hood begins, and then it's not that good. So a lot of people always joke that the governor has to have the motorcade so that way they can fight their way in and out of the mansion, because it's pretty much surrounded by like the hood at this point. So you know, that's always an interesting one. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the poll, because I know many of y'all have been dying to get to the polls. We love the polls, and we always have to cover them. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, we currently have the poll running right now, and let's go ahead and ask the question and see what everybody thinks. So the poll says, a Russian jet violated Poland's airspace for well over a minute today, and is Russia preparing to attack? So 56% said no, Russia's simply playing games like usual, while 24% said yes, Russia is preparing for an attack, and 15% said it's possible, but really honestly unlikely. And I would say this, considering the fact that we just had another airspace intrusion, just a short while ago, and now Poland's airspace is also getting intruded by Russia as well. It sounds like some concerted effort to test the response times and also the reactionary periods of these countries. And it sounds to me like Poland, also, did Poland dispatch any planes, by the way, to actually intercept the Russian aircraft?
I do not believe so. We didn't really get a lot of information on that.
Okay, so I was wondering because the other country, I can't remember which one, was it Estonia that was the other country that was trying to intercept them? Finland, that's right, it was Finland. Finland really didn't dispatch any aircraft, and it sounds like Poland didn't either. So Russia is interfering with these airspaces of these countries, and it seems like there's really not much of a reaction to it at all, which is kind of weird, because I would have thought that if a Russian plane entered a NATO airspace, that would have been an immediate, like, it's time to either go shoot it down or immediately ward them off, one or the other. But it sounds like that's really not happening, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to say it's Russia playing games and maybe testing the reactionary period, but to say they're preparing for an attack, that might be too early to say that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say they're probably just playing games, testing reaction times, that kind of a business. Pretty much what Matthew said to a T. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least the best I can. And with that, I see some people saying, hood review? Oh, wait a minute, we haven't done a hood review in like a year, have we, Matthew? So a lot of people have never heard of that.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
So back in the day, we used to do this running on empty hood review, and we would go around and we would look at hoods inside the US of A. We also would do it around the world. So if you threw in a super chat and you had a request for a specific hood review, we would go and look at the hood and we would rate it if it was good or if it was bad. And generally people used to throw in bad ones, but by the time that segment started to kind of like fade out, everyone was just throwing in their neighborhoods that they grew up in, and they were pretty nice. And so then I was like, what the hell? Like almost every single time I'd be like, what the hell? That's not a hood. That's just a nice suburb. And, you know, like, but Montgomery is a hood. Like the whole thing for the large part is like one massive hood. The only part I'd say is somewhat decent is Old Cloverdale, which has no pictures, mind you. And also all the hotels around it have like 3 stars. So y'all can kind of get an idea as to the area. But it's an interesting place. These are our old stomping grounds, mind y'all. This is actually where we're pretty much from for the large part. But it is not a good place by any means. It was okay when we were born, but every single year past that point, it just got worse until the point that we left. You know, and a lot of people have left the town. The crime rate is so bad that I think in the last mayoral election, that was really the only thing they talked about was fixing the crime. And so the answer to that was, let's police it less. And that didn't do what it was supposed to do. The crime got even worse. And so now it's pretty much like a no-go zone. It's practically like New Orleans is these days, but for Alabama. Like if you're going through Montgomery, you stay on Interstate 65 and just make your way in and make your way out. And you do not pull over anywhere in Montgomery. So
what is fascinating, though, is the Cultimat actually originated right here next to downtown Montgomery. That's where the whole Cultimat first came into existence, was right around that area.
Yeah, that's actually where the Enforcer came into existence as well. I mean, that's where we're from. Also, I don't call this our hometown because we kind of moved from here when I was very young, like a couple of years old, to a place near to Montgomery. But yeah, it wasn't a great place. It was not at all. I remember the main reason that we moved was because our parents were scared that on the first day of school we were going to get stabbed, because that's how bad the public schools are in Montgomery. In fact, all the public schools in Montgomery, they don't even produce folks that can read. Like, I think everyone who comes out of a Montgomery public school, most of them are illiterate, from what I remember. And also the public school system in Montgomery is so bad, it was taken over by the federal government. And that only happens in instances where it is so bad, it's just, you couldn't manage it any worse than that. So that kind of gives you all an idea of Montgomery and what it is. But oh man, it is bad. Like, oh man. I wish we could talk more about it. I'm not gonna like guide y'all around everywhere in it. But man, I don't even know how to begin to talk about it. But one thing that is neat about Montgomery, is that there's this little part. Isn't this it? I don't know if that's it or not. That's not it. I think it's somewhere over here. Yeah. So this is Old Alabama Town, which is a preserved area. It's just a couple of blocks of preserved streets of what Montgomery used to look like. And if this is what it used to look like, it actually used to look pretty decent. But nowadays, they chop down all the trees, they build shitty houses like they do everywhere, and it doesn't really look that nice. But this actually did look pretty neat, and I liked this part of town because I was like, wow, that's cool. But now downtown Montgomery looks like this. And this is actually the nice part too. I just dropped.
Yeah, I was about to say you dropped on the nice street, actually.
Yeah, let me go see if I can drop us down on a not so nice street, which probably would be here. Kind of like this. And this is still an okay street. I'd have to find all the specific ones that you really actually do travel around on. And they also have this really cool building here as well. I forgot, what is this, Matthew? The federal courthouse for this district or something?
Circle around. Let me see the rest of it. Yeah, it says United
Yeah.
States Courthouse right there, so it must be a federal courthouse.
Yeah, this is a really nice building. But beyond that, there's not really much going on in Montgomery at all. I would say. Let's see here. What else would be something cool to show y'all here?
What's up with these Bitcoin ATMs popping up everywhere around the world? That's kind of weird. Like I've seen like 2 of those in Montgomery, like on the map. That's kind of odd.
Yeah, I think they're ads. I don't even think those things really exist. Let's see, what else is interesting here in the town? Let's see. Oh, did you know this, Matthew? The Montgomery Biscuit Stadium, because I was doing some research, this building right here, if I can get you closer to that, I'd show it to you with a little biscuits guy on it. Maybe I can get you closer a little bit. But this is the Western Railway of Alabama Depot that was run by the Western Railway before it was merged with the Louisville and Nashville way back in the 1890s. And that's what the main building of the Biscuit Stadium is.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Also, do you know, by the way, that down here at like one of these hotels, I think it's like the Renaissance or something like that. The military actually has like the MEPS, like little facility that you go to actually before you get actually like sent to Gunner. You actually go there to speak to the people and stuff like that, and they give you some forms and stuff to fill out, and then you actually head off to Gunner to be processed at MEPS.
Yeah, I did know that. Also, one time, this was stupid, y'all. This was so dumb. I was looking for a job. Jobs in Montgomery were hard to find, even if they were minimum wage. By the way, minimum wage in Alabama is not $15 an hour or something like that, like it might be in other states. Minimum wage in Alabama is still the federal minimum wage, which is, I believe, $7.25 still, which is nothing. Like, even in Alabama, that doesn't really get you much for an hour of work. Like, that doesn't even buy you a meal anymore for an hour of work, that it would be, decent. And I'm not even saying decent as in good and quality. I mean, like a meal at all. Like, that might be like a quarter of a burger with taxes now, with how much things cost here. But beyond that, the Renaissance Hotel had a job fair thing at one point, and I went there to go see if I could get a job. And so, mind you, they don't have any requirements online for your age. I didn't know you had to be over 21. So I went there at 19, I believe. This was like towards the end of us being there. And I sat down and I explained, yeah, I'm looking for a job. I really can't find one. I was wondering if y'all could find me a job around here. And then they said, wait a minute, you're 19? Yeah? No, sorry, you got to be 21. I was like, well, y'all didn't say that anywhere online. Yeah, but that's kind of a requirement. And then they just stopped talking to me, and I just walked out. I was like, what a waste. Like, why in the world would y'all not list that online? They knew they didn't list that online. And then they just told me to, go ahead and leave. I was like, well, this is stupid. It's like, you wasted my time. It's like, that's dumb. Well, anyways, still, let's see. What else would be interesting to point out here in Montgomery? Oh, yeah, this is the Air War College over here. So anyone who gets in the Air Force and goes to the Air War College, you got to be in Montgomery for a couple of months. Have fun with that one. That's worse than going to Greenland, really. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I won't bore you with everything in Montgomery, because that would be extremely boring to go over all of it. And we went over most of it anyways. So moving on from that, it is time for us to move on into some questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we're now moving back into our super chat segment, and our first one here is going to go to none other than BC Skyman, the channel legend, who throws in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, BC, for that support. As always, I did not see a comment attached, sadly, so nothing to address. But once again, huge shout out to BC for always supporting the channel and helping to keep us running. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a big shout out to BC Skyman for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Didn't throw in a comment. That's usual for BC Skyman these days. But we know that if he had any comments to say, they'd be incredibly kind words. We got to thank you massively for that support, BC Skyman, because If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one. But a huge thanks once again.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to Mortaphobe Gaming, who puts in a $22 donation. And thank you very much, Mortaphobe Gaming, for the support. He said, "Good morning, LSA. And a few weeks ago, Russia announced they would start terrorizing Western commercial aviation. And in the weeks that followed, we saw an absurd amount of plane crashes in America and South Korea. And is there a connection?" I will say this, Mortaphobe, real quick. I personally haven't seen any actual definitive concrete evidence of that, but I will say I also noticed that connection as well after Russia had threatened that. I actually made a short war video explaining what Russia had threatened to do to commercial airlines, and then shortly afterward we did start seeing at least really unusual plane crashes. So I'm not sure if it's Russia connected or just coincidence, but it seems a little bit odd. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I don't believe there's necessarily a correlation to it. Possibly to the South Korean crashes, there may be, but the American crashes seem to be for completely different instances. It appears that the incident in Washington, D.C. was just some sort of a simple error of some kind from the helicopter pilots. The one that crashed in Philadelphia appears to have had an oxygen tank improperly stored, and it exploded for that reason. And then the crash in Alaska, we don't know what the real reasons for that one yet, or even an idea, but for outside reasons, outside of any kind of direct kind of sabotage. So I'd largely say, yes, very coincidental that was stated, and then all of that started to happen, but I don't believe there's any actual correlation, at least in my opinion. But I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, I want to make sure that we thank you greatly for your support in helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to put the tallow in the fries. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving on to our next one here. Someone said, "What are your thoughts on Ye's new line of merch?" No comment. I refer you to Tallow. But anyways, moving on to our next one. This one goes to Boulder Boy, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Boulder Boy, for that $20 support and helping to keep us running as well. And Boulder Boy says, "Some money for last Saturday's day off."
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And it was not a plan, really, to take off Saturday. We were just kind of a little tired and winded, trying to catch our breath and get back to running the show. But I do have to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, someone did ask, and I want to make sure to circle back and comment on this since Matthew commented on it. Have you seen Ye's new merch? And I personally have not, but if you do see some merch, make sure to check the price sticker. You know what I mean? But that's some questionable stuff right there. Like, I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I'm just gonna be entirely honest. That guy is mentally gone. Like, why in the world do they keep even letting him be out in the public? Like, I'm just gonna have to say that and be honest about it. Like, free speech is a thing, but this guy is mentally unwell. You know, I feel like there should be some... I feel like if anything should happen, we should pass forward the Kanye Act in Congress that ensures that mentally unwell people get the psychiatric help they need, regardless whether they know they need it or not. I feel like that would be a fairly good kind of an act to bring forward by Congress, because this is a celebrity that clearly has mentally snapped at this point and is very unwell, because he flips from one thing to the next day after day. Like, it's not a good look for him. So and also it's not really a good look for anything for that matter. I mean, the guy is just nuts.
Did you know the story with the merch? Like, do you know what the really big deal was about it?
Yeah, kinda. I haven't really looked at it too much.
So basically, to sum it up, I think Shopify actually shut down his store actually after he did this. I think he ran a Super Bowl ad and told people, go to, my Yeezy, whatever, like stuff like that. So people went there, and after they went there, they saw on his site that he was apparently selling some shirts with a questionable symbol in the middle of the shirt. If y'all know what I mean, a very prominent questionable symbol that was on the shirt. So Shopify shut down the store and said it violated their terms. And he's been going on a rampage ever since about that. But yeah, the merch was shocking, to say the least.
So actually, I do know what the merch is. It was a white T-shirt with a certain kind of a symbol of a certain kind of a political party that existed in Germany under a certain kind of a leader in the 1930s to 40s. And I did see it. And I'm not going to lie, folks. the guy's lost it. Like, that guy's been mentally gone for a good while now. And some people are saying he needs to chill out. I seriously do think that he needs to be taken into the custody of the state of California and be brought to a mental institution at this point, because he's lost it. I mean, like, the guy is mentally, like, gone. He's insane, I would say, at this point. Because no rational person does any of the stuff that he's been doing. And, and I don't talk about a lot of celebrity drama and stuff because I'm really not into it, but the things he's been doing, like the red carpet thing that you know about as well, Matthew, because I know that was all over Twitter. I saw it a couple of times. I was like, why in the world do we have to see this? I was like, this isn't what I'm on Twitter for. But the whole red carpet thing, that thing with the Super Bowl and the Shopify store, among many other things, it's like, this guy's insane. And the state of California needs to take him into some sort of mental protection custody or something along those lines, because he's not well. And it seems to me that he's the best case for having mentally well people possibly get into the care of the state at this point, because the amount of damage that they do is pretty interesting. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And people keep on asking what we're talking about. We're talking about Kanye. I don't know why in the world people are asking, am I talking about RFK or Musk or anything? We haven't even brought up their names in this. I'm talking specifically about Kanye. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And also the dress was, I don't know what was up with that dress. Did you see that, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, if people are calling that a dress, it's kind of interesting. His girlfriend was basically naked.
Yeah, that was just more so a net put over like a see-through. I don't even know what the hell it was. It was not a dress. But I'm just gonna be honest with y'all here. Like, that should have caught an indecency charge. Like that. I think normally you would be put on an offenders registry for doing something like that in public. Like, right? Like, am I wrong for that? Like, I think that usually is what the charge would be for that sort of a deal. And having that broadcast on pretty much everything, everywhere, that was not good. Like, I would have to say that's not really a great thing. Yeah. Anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And let's see here. So, a plastic bag, yeah, that would be a good way to describe it. But
of course, here comes the people saying, "Got pics." No, no.
Folks. I get the jokes, and they're actually pretty funny. But on a serious level, though, this kind of stuff needs to be curbed. Like that kind of a deal, because I don't think anyone was thinking about this at the time. But there is a decent amount of children that were at that event in person, and there was a decent amount of children that were watching that, because it was on TV channels with really no parental guidance kind of protocols at all, because it's not expected to be on it. So a whole bunch of kids just got to see a full frontal right there in front of them on TV. Like, I don't know if people are thinking about that kind of a thing when they see that, because it's funny to make jokes, and I'd agree, you can make plenty of jokes till the cows come home, and I would be, slapping my knee over them, but at the same time, that kind of stuff should not be allowed on any kind of national television network. And the fact that that was done deliberately, I would say that there should be some indecency charges pressed on that particular person who did that. And also, I would say that there needs to be some kind of a look into the mental well-being of the two of them, because you'd have to be mentally unwell to do something like that on national TV. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. I hope that kind of lays out why I'm taking a little bit of a hard stance on that sort of thing, because I'm not saying that I'm trying to impose on anyone's rights to see that kind of a thing on the internet. If you're above 18, you can look at whatever you want, but putting that on national TV in front of a family audience, hell no, that should never be accepted. But anyways, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Duncan VR, who's, of course, another channel legend who puts in a $25 donation, and thank you very much, Duncan, for the $25 support and helping to keep us running yet again. And Duncan has the animal noises, and let's jump into it. He said, "Baba, moo, inshallah, meow. The fly wants to go to the Gaza strip club, moo moo. He wants a strip search."
No.
Meow. Enforcers... wait a minute. Hold on. Let's see here. Enforcers attempt horse, donkey, mule, and dolphin noises. They eat the dogs on Tuesday. Woof, inshallah. The Americans, baba.
And thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR, and throwing in those typical animal noises. What an amazing thing, I'd have to say. And I got to thank you so much once again for making this a traditional Lee Spring Army stream, because without that, it wouldn't be normal. It just wouldn't be a normal night here on the show. And I got to thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and throwing in the animal noises. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But a huge thanks to you so much once again.
Yes, indeed. And also, by the way, I saw someone in the live chat said, not in good taste, but the human body isn't something to be afraid of or ashamed of. My thing is this, I'm kind of with the enforcer. If there's children potentially in the audience, like, I know some people are like, oh, wow. But it's like, you know, there's children in the audience potentially. It's like you're exposing yourself potentially to children out there. And you can say, oh, well, it was a dress of some sort. It was some type of covering. But it really wasn't, though. Because I saw, like, one picture and I was like, whoa, what the hell? I was like, I didn't know what I was looking at first, and now I realized, wait a minute, this is actually in public, this thing right here that's going on. I was like, and also that's Kanye standing beside this woman, which is apparently his girlfriend. I was like, what the hell? And what was the event they were at? Wasn't it like some like really well-known event?
Yeah, it was some sort of an awards event or something like that, I believe.
Yeah, I was shocked. I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on with that. I thought maybe it was AI or a joke for a second or something. But then I was like, okay, that's actually real. That's sort of interesting. But no, I mean, that's not like something acceptable at all.
So I'm going to address two things. We're going to address that as well. And I'm also going to address someone saying, you post vids of people getting killed and make jokes about it, but it's worse than a near naked woman. Well, the difference is that kids aren't watching my show. Adults are watching my show. That's the difference here. I never at all pretended that I'm a family-friendly show or a show for kids. So that's the difference in between me and that event. Second thing is that there needs to be clear lines on what kind of exposure is indecent, because once you start to create gray lines like that, who's to say that Herbert the pervert down the way doesn't indecently expose himself to some kid, you know, in Harpersville, Wisconsin, and then he says, well, look, I was just showing off. There's nothing wrong with the human body. Because if you start to gray the area on what is indecent exposure, there are going to be sick people out there who take full advantage of that. And then at that point, what kind of a precedent are we laying out? It just depends on if you're hot or not or what. That's something that legally cannot be enforced. Because when you go into a court and you go, Your Honor, this woman exposed herself in front of the whole United States on the Grammys, but she was hot, so she gets a pass. But Herbert the pervert, who did that in front of a 13-year-old kid in Wisconsin, he's not getting a pass because he's old and creepy. And that's where that kind of a thing doesn't really happen in a legal precedent, because that makes the line ambiguous. It's either acceptable or it isn't. And I go with it's not acceptable, because the kind of implications of making that sort of behavior acceptable in public is extremely dire to the well-being of really anyone. Like, you're pretty much giving any kind of a sexual predator out there a blank check to do whatever they want in public, and then a court has to go, look, we can't really touch that because now that's in a legally gray area. And that's what I'm not for, like, at all. So
man, I can only imagine like going in there. Let's say the judge is like, so why should we let you go, ma'am, for exposing yourself like that indecently? And they say, oh, Your Honor, she's a 10. Okay, let her go. It's
yeah,
no, it's like no.
Like you sit there, Your Honor. I know that we've let this slide with like every single woman out there that has a passable body and some curves, but Your Honor, this guy here is 54 years old. He's got a beer gut and he didn't really look that good, so we want to get him. And then the judge goes, you know what, that's fair, 10 years in prison, and he's on the registry. It's like, what kind of ambiguous, like it's just becoming ambiguous at this point, and that legally just cannot work. The law is clear. Like that's why like I don't care if people say the body is great. There's certain kinds of adult websites out there for that if you want to look at them, but that's not just for the general public. And there should be some certain kinds of rules and regulations, really laws in general, that lay out what kind of exposure is decent and indecent. Otherwise, we start entering areas where whole bunches of sick people can do all kinds of sick things and then get away with it because the gray area is incredibly large. So I hope that does address that fairly well. And now the person who said that said, what the hell, strawman extreme? Like, no, that's exactly what would happen. I mean, you know, like, that's why you don't bring kids to a nudist beach. Like, the gray area there is a little bit too big, so you don't bring them. That's why nudist beaches are, I believe, 18 and up, if I'm correct, in most places where that exists in the United States. So, you know, that would be my take on that. That's just not great. I don't know, call me a traditionalist on that or whatever, but I generally like to protect people from that kind of a thing. Like, I'm not saying bar people from doing that. If you want that, that's fine, but there's going to be specific places for that. But that's not just going to be all out there in the public all day, 24/7. That most people don't want to deal with that all day, every day. You know what I mean? But anyways, with that, hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to 10K, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, 10K, for the two $20 supports here back to back. I think they mentioned they want me to read them off all at once as well, so I shall oblige. But 10K said in the $40 super chat, they said a few episodes ago, the Enforcer had a deep rabbit hole about rare earth metals. And in 1971, the U.S. Money went from gold to oil. And do you see this happening in the future with rare earth? And also, when you do change the U.S. money to rare earth in 2024, what rare earth would you pick? Asking for a friend, no inside trading here. Well, that's good. You wouldn't make a good politician then if you're not for insider trading, but that's okay.
And I would have to say, thank you so much for the support. But the U.S. money being backed by oil, that's kind of like a thing that people say. It's not really true. Like, people call it the petrodollar. That's just like a mythical thing. The US dollar is backed by faith. Like, that's literally it. So just a belief that the dollar has value is what gives it value in the modern day. It's not attached to anything, really. But and also, some people are going to be like, what do you mean it's just attached by faith? Yep, that, like, if you do not believe, like, if everyone just tomorrow decided the dollar is worthless, the dollar is now worthless. That's all that gives it value at this point. But beyond that, if we had to attach the money to something, which I don't really think would be a good idea these days, because the reason why we detached it from the gold standard is because at that point there was so much money in circulation that we actually couldn't really attach the value of the dollar to gold. Because if you went to a bank and requested, the amount of US dollars in total in gold, there just wasn't enough gold to go around to, value every dollar. So then that's when we went to the faith system. The good faith system. But beyond that, if we had to attach it to something, I would say probably attaching it to a pretty steady, I wouldn't actually attach it to a rare earth, because rare earths can rise and fall in value, I believe, a pretty good bit, depending on their industrial demand. And so if the industrial demand drops, the value of everything drops. So I would say something that would be a lot better to attach it to would be something that is required practically daily at this point, say like coal, because coal rarely ever changes in price massively. I mean, if you ever look at the price of coal, it's a pretty decent, stable kind of a price these days. So that would ensure that the dollar would have a pretty stable value over time, and it wouldn't be rapidly fluctuating, kind of like Bitcoin or anything else that's really just attached to nothing or something, but it heavily fluctuates. So that's what I largely say. I would never really do it with a precious rare earth or anything like that, because most of them just fluctuate wildly. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, someone said fiat currency is just wrong. I don't really know why. I mean, it's like, what does it matter if you can get gold out of it? I just never really understood that. What is the point of getting gold? Gold has this supposed value to people, but at that point, gold is you're just moving the good faith and credit from the dollar to gold, and you just have an extra step in between. Because what value does gold actually have to regular people like you and me? It has no value. It's just like a dollar. You can't use it for anything rather than a currency exchange. And some people are going to say, you can make a clock. Well, I don't see any of y'all with clock making work inside of y'all's house, and I don't have that either. So, that's more of like an industrial purpose, but really, that's my question. Nothing we use for currency has value. We set a value to it in our minds. We go, this thing is now valuable. But it really doesn't have any value behind it. It's just simply to make sure there's some sort of a uniform exchange going on instead of bartering, where the value of everything can change literally with each and every bartering deal that is made. That's really the whole point of currency. So it doesn't really matter to me whether it was gold or just a dollar backed with good faith and credit, or coal for that matter, a dollar backed by coal. It just doesn't really matter to me, because all of it really has no worth at all. You're just then at that point, if your dollar is exchangeable in coal, then you're just moving the good faith and credit to coal. It's like, that's really the same thing to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But really, you could attach the value to anything. I mean, who's like? There's an interesting game out there. Speaking of like an idea, this one was really cool to me. Called Frostpunk 2. It's set in a fictitious world in the 1910s, where the world froze over about 30 years before. And in that game, the currency is heat tokens. So what you do is that you work at your job in this game, like all the citizens do, to make heat tokens. And if you want to, you can go to the central bank in this frozen apocalypse city, and you can exchange them for heat. So one heat token is equivalent to, I believe, 1 minute of heat, or something along those lines. So you can get a minute of heat for your token. So it actually has some sort of a value attached to something, and that's an actual value that you could invest in, trade, and spend, because, you know, heat in that kind of a world is very important. If you don't have heat, you freeze to death. You know, that's really the same thing you can do with anything. You can attach the value of a currency to quite literally anything, and it will have value at that point because it's exchangeable for a base rate of something. So, you know, to me, I wouldn't really want it attached to anything, but if I attached to anything, it wouldn't be a rare earth. It actually would be something fairly common, maybe like oil, or, well, oil can actually fluctuate a pretty good bit. Coal is a fairly standard thing. I would feel like I would base it on coal, which isn't rare. It's incredibly common, but its price still stays fairly stable. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. But still, a very interesting question, 10K, and thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Christian Hamrick, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Kristen, for that $20 support and helping to support the channel. And also, let me do a quick check here for a second. Let me do a quick check. I'm trying to scroll through here. That is Christian's first ever super chat on the stream. I had to make sure, though, and go back and look. But thank you very much, Christian, for the first ever support. And he said, recently, there have been many new weapon systems revealed by Ukraine, or to be in use in support of Ukraine. And would it be plausible, considering the evidence of Ukraine winning, that these systems are in the full use against Russia?
Hey, can you reread that one again? That was actually very in-depth.
Yes, Christian said that recently there have been many new weapon systems revealed by Ukraine to be used in support of Ukraine. And would it be plausible, considering the evidence of Ukraine winning, that these systems are in full use against Russia?
Yes, I would say so. A lot of these weapon systems are generally for the purpose of defeating the Russians in some way they really can't counter, and a lot of that's in the drone category. And I would say that really is a big reason as to why they're winning, because they're driving the Russian economy to their knees, which is really the reason why they're starting to win these days. So with that, I hope that does address it well. Very good question, by the way, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're about to move on to the next one. But before we do, someone said, what about, where in the world was it? It was an interesting one. How about the blood of a moonshell crab, or a horseshoe crab, as we call it down here? The problem with that, I love horseshoe crabs, by the way. They're really neat to me. Here they are. These things.
Those things. I like those things, kind of.
Those things are pretty neat to me. This is what they look like underneath. So it's quite literally just like a normal crab underneath this shell here. But the horseshoe crab's blood is actually used for medical purposes, if y'all don't know. It's a very special kind of a blood. It's actually blue in color. And it does really well in medical testing. But beyond that, I wouldn't want to back up a currency with the blood of the horseshoe crab, because there's not a lot of it out there. It's extremely valuable because there's not much of it, and the demand is incredibly high in the medical industry. So yes, the demand is high, but if someone came in and said, yes, I would like say 1 gram of horseshoe crab blood in exchange for my dollar at the bank, that'd be very hard to follow through on. Like, for example, you could say $1 is worth 1 pound of coal, and you could set the rate on that, and that would make pretty decent sense. But horseshoe crab blood would be a pretty hard thing to get for anyone in a large enough size or amount to really make the dollar backed by it. So that would be my kind of a thing. And also, if there was ever a synthetic replacement to horseshoe crab blood, the value of the dollar drops drastically, because horseshoe crab blood became worthless at that point in the medical industry. I hope that does address that. That was a very good question, by the way. I thought that was a very interesting one. But that would be my 2 cents on the horseshoe crab blood kind of a thing. And a lot of people are asking, are they tasty? I don't know. I don't think these things are really edible. I think there's very little meat in them. So I think most people avoid eating them. But they're still neat little things. Like, they just crawl around, and they're just little, like, horseshoe-shaped crabs. They're just cool like that. But also, someone said gold never drops in value. And I mean, yeah, you could say that, but the thing is that there is drops. Like, for example, in 2020, it went from being worth about 2,000 all the way down to 1,600 over the course of that year. And then it went all the way down to 1,600 in 2022, like again. So it does drop in value, but it generally climbs. That is true. But that's true for everything. I mean, if we go look at, say, Apple stocks, let me go over the max. I mean, it's constantly rising. I mean, generally everything economically is always constantly rising. So you could always make the argument, oh, well, you know, like let's just you know, attach it to this. It never drops. I mean, hell, railway company stocks don't even drop in value over a long period of time. They're constantly rising. Like, everything's always constantly rising. So, you know, it's a little bit of a misnomer to say gold never drops in value, because over a long period of time, yes, that's true, but over a long period of time, that's true for practically everyone everywhere, unless if you're talking about Sears or, you know, Macy's, which are going under. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat. This one goes to Paul Carroll, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Paul, for that support. He said, why does Russia leave the street lights on at night?
That's what they're for. Like the street lights for lighting up the streets at night. What's interesting, to give you all a little bit of a background into street lighting, or gas lighting as it used to be called back in the day. That's actually funny, y'all, is that it actually used to be called gas lighting. But we'll get to that here in a second. The idea came about almost simultaneously in London and New York at the same time. The idea was that criminals are creatures of the night and only do their crime in the dark. So dark city streets is where crime happens, because it's dark, no one can see who's doing it, and they get away with it. So London and New York had the same idea almost simultaneously. What if we came up with some way to have a massive system of lights in the streets, so that way they would light up the streets, and it would make it a lot less easy for these criminals to conduct their crime. So London and the city of New York all put up street lights, and generally crime actually did drop because of it. It's actually a general deterrent of crime, because if witnesses can see who you were and give a description to the police, it generally dissuades people from conducting that kind of a crime. And that's why the joke is that you get mugged in the back alley. There's no street lights in the back alley, and it's darker back there, so it's hard to see what's going on or who did it. But beyond that, originally, a lot of these gas lights, a lot of these lights in the streets were actually provided gas for their lighting. And it wasn't oil, or it wasn't normal gas. It was actually coal gas, which is made out of baking coal. And it actually releases a form of flammable gas when you're baking coal, actually when you're burning it. And so they would send that through a gas works in London, and New York City, and Baltimore. Baltimore being the first city in the world that actually had a public gas works. And that gas would then exit out of these small little atomizers at the top of these street lamps, and it would be lit. It was permanently lit. And that's what would create the street lights. So that's generally where it comes from. But that's why they keep them on at night, is because generally around the world, street lights are used to try and deter crime by creating a bit of a bright atmosphere where criminals would feel like they really couldn't get away with a crime that easily. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And let's see here. Let's see. It's almost like they were let's see. Considering people are committing crime in the open and getting filmed by phone cameras, that deterrent obviously no longer works. Yeah, people kind of got used to it, I guess, and so people don't give a shit if there's street lights anymore or not. And also, criminals are generally stupid. Like, you can deter some people by that, you know, where they go and like try and mug you in a back alley or something like that. It isn't well lit, but generally criminals are fairly stupid. A lot of them are flagrantly stupid, to the point that it's shocking. You know, like they stick up a gas station and then they get arrested and they go, "What did I do?" You know, like, I didn't do nothing. And it's like, you just robbed a gas station at gunpoint. It's like, that's something. And then their family comes out and says they don't do anything. And then, you know, it's a whole thing. But beyond that, that's true. These days, it doesn't really matter that much. You can have street lamps and people will still do stupid stuff. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Rebel117, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Rebel, for that $20 support. They said, I used to listen to a certain particular YouTuber here on YouTube that covers the Ukraine war. However, in recent days, I've noticed that they are trying to paint a more grim narrative and like Ukraine's about to fall. And what would you like to say about that?
Which one is that, Matthew? Don't say it on air. Just text it to me because I'd like to know. I'm fairly interested. So I'm going to wait for that in the meantime so that way I can kind of get an idea of how to say what I can about that specifically. Yeah, so basically, I'm going to explain this the most neutral way I can, but there really is no way to neutrally explain it because this is just a run-of-the-mill kind of a deal. So the guy you're talking about is a very political person, leans a very hard direction politically. And people like that, on that side or the other side, the world changes for them depending on who is in charge. So when their party is in charge, everything is sunshine and roses. They could literally not afford to live, and they'd still say it's great and it's never been better in America. But when the other party gets in charge, that's not the party that they like, then everything's terrible. The world's falling apart. America's not a country to love anymore. We're all lost people. We might as well all just give up, pretty much, is what a lot of those people advocate. He's one of those people. It's much like anyone else in this country these days. Because you'll notice, like, sit back, take a step back from the whole political thing if you're in it, and take a look at the last year. Before this, everything in Ukraine was fine and honky-dory. They're hardly getting support from the U.S. government because they're keeping it at a trickle. But Ukraine is just doing so good, and they're winning so good, and everything's so great and wonderful, and it's great, and it's incredible. And then a new president comes in that's not the one they want. And then all of a sudden, the support is still going on like it was. It's still flooding over there. Ukraine appears to be backed by the United States. The United States is taking aggressive actions towards the Russians on practically every level. And the Russians are escalating into nearly World War III at this point, which is kind of what this person wanted under the last administration. And now that this president's doing it, it's not what he wanted because it's not the political party he's for. That's really the reality of it. That's why a grim picture is being painted, because it's more so politically motivated than anything. I'll be entirely honest with you all. The picture for Ukraine under both administrations has been good, in my opinion. The support's continued. It looks like the United States is maintaining its own interest and Ukraine's interest in mind. Support is continuing to flow. The Ukrainians are emboldened at this point to continue their strikes against the Russian Federation in much larger form than the past administration. This administration is allowing that because of the lessons learned in the previous administration. Things look good to me. And the Ukrainians are conducting counterattacks across the wide front. They're stopping the Russians dead at this point, or they're pushing them back from Pokrovsk and pushing them further back in Kursk. Generally, things look good to me. You would have to be someone who drank the political Kool-Aid to think that it doesn't look good, because it looked good under the last administration, looking good during this one. That would be my general take. But that's also why I tell people not to get your news from politically charged sources. So Fox News, CNN, they're out. Don't get news from them. May as well be getting propaganda at that point. A lot of the quote unquote Ukraine news channels, I generally separate us from them at this point and call us a world news channel. Although a lot of our world news coverage does pertain to Ukraine, because I'm not about what they're about. We have a particular term for the group that they're in. It's a very cliquish group, and you have to be extremely political to be a part of it. That would be my 2 cents on it. So I don't get involved in that group. We have folks around the channel that I don't think are political. So like Civdiv, Dennis Davidoff, folks like that. But I don't get involved in that other group because they're entirely fueled by politics, and that's the only reason why they do their coverage and say the things they do, is that it has a political spin to it. We keep our coverage neutral. If things look good, they're good. If they look bad, they're bad. I don't really care who's in charge or who won or who lost. I'm just telling y'all straight as it is, in my analysis, what it looks like. So I hope that does address that the best I can. I thank you so much once again for the support. But that would be why in some channels you're seeing that things look terrible and the world is over, and then in others it's just fine, like it is on here. It's because we're not politically motivated and we don't really have an agenda to make it sound like things are so jover. Like for example, I'll tell you why that guy is saying that things are terrible. He's saying things are terrible because he doesn't agree necessarily with the domestic political situation, which we're never here to make a comment on. And because of that, he's trying to make it sound like the person in charge is terrible in every way. And so that way people who watch his channel, he thinks, will be dissuaded from voting for a certain political affiliation in the future. In a sense, trying to pretty much rig public opinion against someone when it may not be right or wrong. Like, I'll just be honest with y'all, it seems to me like both presidents have had almost the same running track with the war so far, at least in what actually counts, as each other. I mean, I don't really see, honestly, much of a difference. So, like, that's why I'm like, it looks great. Like, it looks great under the current president, looked great under the last one. The current president's using lessons learned from the first, so being a little bit more aggressive. Beyond that, looks fine to me. So that would be my take. That's not take
And
shooting hero.
also, and also, even if people aren't happy with it, like it's perfectly fine if you're not happy with it. But at some point, you got to have just a little bit of hope that things will turn out fine. Like at the end of the day, I've spoken to people before. They're like, it doesn't look like it's going right and things like that. I'm still of this belief. Hold out hope, and hopefully it'll turn out right. Because if you lose all hope, that's not a good thing either. So you guys like try to keep some hope up, even if it looks a little bit grim. So honestly, me though, I would say generally speaking, the Ukraine war is going to sort of like it's going to run itself basically. There's really not much that people can do if Putin's not willing to talk and Zelensky is willing to keep fighting. There's not much that anybody can do, even the United States, to put a complete end to it. Because there's just no way to actually like physically stop it. And if they want to keep fighting, they'll keep fighting. That's pretty much the end of it.
Yeah, and like that's something that a lot of people don't get, and that's already been made clear at this point that the Russians don't want to even get to the negotiating table. So we just have to see that the war keeps going until they get to the negotiating table. That's how it works. Like I don't think people get that. I know that guy gets it, but he doesn't want to make it sound like he gets it, so that way you can try and spin the story a different way. Like it's a really sad thing when you get into political stuff. Like it really is. I'll be honest with y'all. I was political at a point. I was very political in high school and right outside of high school. And then, like, what's actually crazy? I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory. I actually ran for a city council in our hometown back in 2020, and I was a decently political person back then. And then I saw how the party that I said I was a part of back then treated other members of their party that wasn't really in the clique with them in the old boy system in that town. And then after that, I sat back, took a step back, and I was like, are these political parties really what you think they are? And then when you look at them both, you're like, no, they're not. And there's no reason to really get behind them and like cult worship them and drink the ideological Kool-Aid, because neither of them, as they exist right now, have any of your good interest in mind. It's about serving themselves and then lying to the public to get voted back in and continue on getting a paycheck. That's really what both of the parties boil down to at this point these days, and very little is done in the support or interest of the citizenry. It's really just done in the interest of themselves, and maybe they'll throw a bone to the citizenry that voted them in from time to time, but that's only to incentivize them to vote for them again. So after that, that's when I completely backed off of politics, and I was like, like politics isn't everything. In fact, it's really nothing to pay attention to. Generally assume a politician is lying to your face. Look at their actions. Their actions will speak far louder than their words ever will, and then you can really get the idea of what's going on. That's why we have been that's why we've largely been correct on everything that we've analyzed so far in the war, while a lot of these other people have been wrong. Like that guy you're talking about in the super chat, that's saying that Ukraine is losing. He also said about a year ago that if this president became president, Ukraine was going to be left to dry on day one of his presidency, and that was not true. That was just completely fueled by political rhetoric. We said nothing would change, and nothing did, and we were absolutely dead on the nail with that, because I didn't base my analysis on my political bias. I based my analysis on logical, geopolitical, and diplomatic sense, and that made much more of an outcome that made sense than what that guy was saying. So, I hope that's even a better argument for why you shouldn't be getting your news from politically motivated people. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, it looks like a lot of people are like, whoa, that's enforcer lore. I didn't know that. Yeah, I ran for city council at 18 years old in my town in 2020. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I got like 20 or 21% of the vote. which doesn't sound like much, but the guy I was going up against was one of the old boys in the town, had been there for like 30 years, and was friends with the mayor, and the mayor literally had the city go around and pretty much confiscate my signs wherever I put them. So I wasn't even really able to run a campaign because literally I put up the sign one day, they'd steal it the next, like literally right off the side of the street on the easement where it could be, like according to the rules. And so hardly anyone in my district in the town even knew that I was running, and I still got 20% of the vote. So I was pretty happy with that. I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, wow, I got 20% of the vote at 18 years old. That's crazy. Like I was actually blown away with that. But my plan for the town, like I was back then saying the same things I largely say now. I would say things like, look, we need to pave the roads in the town, try and incentivize businesses to come here. And then I lost the election. And then believe it or not, the city then just did exactly what I said I was going to do. They started paving roads and then bringing businesses to Wetumpka, the literal ones that I said that we would want to bring. Which is crazy. Like you haven't seen it, Matthew, but literally the same businesses that we said in the campaign that we should have brought up there and try and give them benefits to be there and stuff, they brought them there and pretty much gave them the same benefits that I said we should give them.
Did it really take two young people like us? Like I don't know how old I was at the time, like 19 years old. Also, by the way, I ran the Enforcers campaign, by the way, so that's why I'm talking like this, because I actually ran the thing. Some people I've seen in the chat have actually seen some of the videos I actually created for that campaign, which apparently some people actually found quite amusing. I had the whole town in a complete uproar about those videos that we made and stuff like that. We had the guy pissed that we were running against. He was absolutely pissed off. He wouldn't even speak to us or look at us or anything like that when he showed up to like go cast his vote for himself. But that guy was horrified. Like he apparently thought that that we were about to upset the entire election and throw him out of the position that he was hoping to get, because he figured that since he had been in the town so long that he must be a shoo-in. But once he started seeing us put so much work into it, he got scared. He started posting billboards everywhere. He started posting street signs all over the place. He started going on a really aggressive campaign to try to make sure that he won, which was hilarious because we're only like 18 and 19 years old, and this guy was like, I don't know, like 60 something years old, and he's panicking thinking we're about to beat him in an election when he's lived there his whole life, like for 60 something years. It was honestly hilarious when you think back about it. It was hilarious.
Man. Dude, I remember we had this one campaign video we made called We Call Him the Streak, and that was a wild one, man, honestly, looking back at it. But everyone in the town saw it, man. Like, everyone around the area saw it, not just in the town, but all the surrounding towns. So one time I had to go back to my school to get my diploma because it was in the middle of the Wuhan whirlybird right at the start, so I didn't get to actually go and graduate. I just had to go get the diploma later. And when I went in there, everyone said, "Oh, we saw that video, the streak. Oh my God, that was so funny." And I was like, really? Like, everyone had seen it. Everyone in the town had seen it. And like, that was crazy to me. But anyways, like, I was really, like, looking at it now, I'm happy that I didn't get the city council position because nothing would have come of it anyways. But it was a very interesting experience. And when you go through the political system, even on a local level, you'll learn how two-faced, conniving, and backstabbing it really is on every level, even within a single party. And that's why I'm just not a political person. Like, that was like an eye-opening experience to me, because I was like, wow, these people are assholes. I was like, and the other side.
Honestly though, like seriously speaking, at that local level like that, and I've really learned this after I got my whole education in political science. I really did not know this because I was fresh out of high school and so was the enforcer. I hadn't gone to like political science in college yet or anything to learn anything about it. But on the local level, politics really doesn't revolve around, like the big party ticket items like that. It's totally different, like the local level. Like, you can try to appeal to like the two main parties in the country if you want to. That'll help you in some extent. But mainly the local people is all about who you know and how long you've been in the community. That's the really, really big thing about the local stuff. And what's weird is the local elections are the hardest ones to win most of the time compared to, for example, if you're running for a representative or a senator or something like that. Those are actually easier because you typically don't know people on a personal level as a senator, but on a local level, like a rep or somebody, it's like a councilman or something like that. They have to know the community like individually to get votes, and those those individual voters then tell their family to vote for them, and that's how you win. But it's just honestly, we didn't stand a chance. Like honestly,
Man,
looking at it,
I
that
wish
guy lived there for 60 years. We gave him a run for his money, considering we were so young. But like that was a tough one.
Man, honestly, man, I wish we had gone a little bit, because at the time we thought it might be a good idea to try and lean into the political thing, like the national political thing. But I wish we had gone with my original idea, Matthew, where I was like, nah, I don't think we should touch any political stuff. Like we should just, do what we do and say what we say. We should have done that, and we also should have gone door to door. Because we didn't go door to door, just to let y'all know, and we still got 20% of the vote, which was like still wild.
I think it's because the bug was going around, wasn't it?
Yeah, but we should. But knowing how that went, because we got it anyways and we lived, like we should have just gone door to door and been a super spreader. Like we should have just gone and done that. Because I'm sure, man, honestly, man, at that point we probably would have won like 30-something% or 40% of the vote. By that point, we still wouldn't have won, but we would have been a lot closer to winning. For sure, I would think.
Well, you remember the other guy's campaign manager, somebody that actually did videos or something like that. He actually found like a way to contact me directly, and he sent me an email talking about how good like our political videos were or something like that. And it was actually the other guy's like campaign manager that was writing me to tell me that. I was like dumbfounded. I was like, no way this guy's like campaign manager just went behind his back and emailed us to say how good our stuff was. Like, no way in hell that's true. But it was actually the guys, somebody connected with him or knew him or something that was making videos actually told us that, which is kind of crazy.
Man, that was insane. But I didn't win. Basically, lessons learned. Because one of the greatest things. Not to say this, everyone says it's very cliche, but it is very true. One of the biggest things that comes out of failure that is a win is learning lessons. And lessons were learned that day, and that's really why y'all see me here and have seen me here for 3 years, being who I am and not getting into politics. Because of my experience with it, and I was like, that's just nothing that you really want to worship or make your daily routine. So with that, anyways, I hope that does address that well, but I know we have so many more questions to get to, and we're going to get to them. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our next question here is going to go to, let's see, this one goes to Joe's RV Home Turtle, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Joe's RV Home Turtle, for that support. He said just a few pennies for the channel.
And thank you so much for the support, Mr. Turtle. The few pennies for the channel, they mean a lot, and they help us to keep this thing rolling. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. Joe's RV Home Turtle and Mr. Turtle, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Uncle Sam's Misguided Child, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Uncle Sam's Misguided Child, for that support. They said, thank you for being patriotic for a republic, so you did not become part of swamp. LSA Thug Life, go Marmot.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Uncle Sam's Misguided Child. And I love to be patriotic for the country. I love to let folks know that there is someone out there that's going to be their cheerleader, and that cheerleader is going to be me and Matthew. We absolutely support and back up everyone in this country with what they're doing every single day. It's a tough life out there for many, and it's a struggle. But nevertheless, we want folks to know that there is someone out there that respects them for the struggles that they go through every single day, and that's Matthew and me, if no one else will. And it's just crazy, y'all. Like, to point this out, I'm just going to say this frankly, because I think a lot of people will agree with this. The last presidency, the economy wasn't really doing great towards the end of it, and prices were rising. So that presidency said, look, suck it up, Jack. You're just going to have to deal with it. The economy's great. And everyone got pissed off for it. Now, the current administration's in, this one right here, prices are still going up. And then they say, look, you're just going to have to learn how to live with it. You're just going to have to cut back a little. Everyone says the same thing, like, when it comes to it. Like, no one's actually out there to actually, like, well, right now, like, I think that it can change, because there has been people in the past, like Teddy Roosevelt, who actually looked out for, all the folks in this country, making sure that they were able to, have a good life and, have a decent living and everything. But folks nowadays just don't give a damn. Like, they'll pretend to give a damn in the elections, and once they get in, they'll just tell you that you're on your own. And I like to let folks know that even though the government is telling y'all that you're on your own, like under the last administration and this one, I want y'all to know that I know that y'all are out there most of y'all toughing it out, battling out every day and every single position out there, and that someone out here in this country actually does appreciate y'all for that and respects y'all for that. Y'all have got a lot of wit and a lot of commitment and a lot of strength to continue on every single day with just meeting that battle of paying the bills. Hopefully that'll change one day. Hopefully I can become the president and help out with that one day in a way that actually counts. But until then, I want you to know that I am proud of every single one of y'all. I'm proud of what y'all turn this country into each and every day, and then I'm proud of y'all for getting out there and battling it out every single day to make sure that y'all can survive and that this nation survives. And so I hope that addresses that well. Thank you so much once again for support. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die.
All right, so with that, moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Brendan West, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Brendan, for the support. And they said, do we have any new information on the development of Iranian nuclear weapons?
Not really at the moment. It's kind of a quiet thing that just cooks in the background. We don't really know much about it, but it is still ongoing. It's just that we don't have any specific details on it on a day-to-day basis. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Vector, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Vector. And it's also good to see you once again, by the way. It's been a minute. And thank you very much for that support. He said, thank you for all that you do. Long live the LSA and progress. Vector Artist Journal Kyiv Edition project coming out this year. And also, I'll be waiting to see that, by the way, Vector, because, of course, Vector is an artist, and he was doing work, I believe, in Kyiv, according to what I remember.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
I'll be very interested to see that as well. And thank you very much, Vector, for the support once again. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support. I can't wait to see that myself. That sounds like it's going to be incredibly neat. And hopefully we'll be able to see it soon, very soon. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to David Savory, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, David, as well, for that support and helping to keep us running. And I did not see a question or a comment to address, sadly. So that is not going to be anything to address. But thank you very much, David, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to thank you once again for enjoying this channel. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support means a lot and helps us to keep this thing rolling day in and day out. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, I see some people saying, Enforcer is great. I'd vote for him because of what I said. You know something that I'm going to do, folks, on day one of this of my presidency in 2040? On day one, I'm going to executive order the abolishment of daylight savings time, and I'm also going to executive order the Food and Drug Administration to create a specific expiration date format. So there will be no more slight differences or differentiations in what the expiration dates are. They're all going to be set standard, and they're all going to be printed and displayed in a similar set way on every single food product. Another thing that we're going to do is that we're going to start moving on into expanding the transportation sector and government services that are provided in this country. So there will be categorical grants issued to every state for their major cities and even some of their smaller cities of note to create public sanitation works that are larger and more fleshed out with slightly better paying jobs than they currently have, so that way the cities will be cleaner. We'll also be trying to move forward more categorical grants for mental institutions, so that way we can start to see that those people who are mentally unwell hopefully can kind of get the care that they need, or at least we, at the worst case scenario in that kind of a project, can get them out of public sight, so that way they're not, menacing the public everywhere they go. Another thing that I would do, let's see, oh yeah, the infrastructure thing, getting back to that, we would expand out the infrastructure, we would keep the airlines as we are, we would keep the interstates as they were, but we'd also try and make sure that the public infrastructure is interconnected, and also public transportation is much more fleshed out, so that way people can actually get from place to place without having to go through the extreme expense of having to buy a card just to get anywhere. I think a lot of those things would be things folks would like. I think it would be, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see if people vote for me. Things like that usually don't win. Usually people win on stupid campaign policies that don't really mean anything. But we'll see. Anyways, with that, I hope y'all like that. If y'all like that, vote for me in 2040. Those are the smaller things. Those are the real small things, but there would be a lot of other major things that would come around. Time for campaigning. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, I saw Vari Mendebrada said, if only we could remove the big money from politics, eliminate lobbying, buying, renting politicians, and getting billionaires out of government. The only problem with that is, Avari, is money talks. And it's really hard to eliminate that from the system because, of course, without the money, the politicians couldn't run as big of elections as they run, or campaigns, excuse me, not elections. And without running an effective campaign with a ton of money involved in it, it would be really sort of tough to win if a candidate on the other side has that money that they don't have. So it's like a necessary evil. It's something that shouldn't exist, but I really am not sure how to get that out of there, to be perfectly honest. It would literally require an overhaul of the entire system from the front to the top to the back, which would be monumental. I'm not even sure if it's really possible, but it's worth a try. But I'm not sure if it actually work. But anyway,
Teddy did it in his way in the very beginning of the 1900s, like during the time of Standard Oil, Carnegie Steel, all that kind of a deal. So if he could do it, I mean, it can be doable again. It's just that it's monumental in effort, and it really takes the entire nation getting behind it nearly.
But is it doable in the modern day though? Because like back in Teddy's time, that was a whole different era. Like the computers, technology wasn't taken off the way it was, where you can literally sway people's votes via technology really easily in widespread mass format. And also, generally, communication wasn't very strong across the country then. It's just a whole different ball game now. And also, you didn't have wealth conglomerated quite like we do today in the top like percentage of the wealth in the country.
Oh?
It's just sort of interesting the way it's working these days.
Man, I would say the cards were stacked against him greater than it ever could be stacked against us in the present day, man. I mean, they didn't even have income tax back then. Like if you made money, you kept it. Like there was not really a lot of taxes back then on anything. That's why the military wasn't big, and that's really why the federal government didn't do much back then, is because they had no tax revenue compared to what we have now. Like I would say 100% that we could do it today because, like, yes, it's running amok at this point. I'll be entirely honest with you all with that. But at the same time, it's not running amok like it did back then. I mean, like, do you know how much Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, all those guys were worth back then? I mean, hell, they put Elon to shame, like, these days and what they're worth nowadays, from the currency back then. Like, it's crazy. And not only that, man, I mean, there was no regulations on anything. I mean, there was no regulations at all on lobbyists. There was no regulations on nothing in that level at that point. So for Teddy to come forward and do something like that, that's entirely doable in my opinion these days. It's just that a lot of people, like the billionaires, not to sound like someone in the government, the billionaires pretty much make people believe that the cards are stacked against them. Think about it, man. Like everything that they put out in the media, everything that they put out everywhere makes you think that the cards are stacked against you when going up against the billionaires. You just can't win. And that's what they would want you to think. But you can win against them quite easily. I mean, if he could win against them back then in 1900 with no regulations on anything whatsoever, and literally J.P. Morgan just bailing out the government about 10 years before, quite literally paying off the national debt on his own, which is insane to think about that someone was wealthy enough back then just to do that out of the blue. And he was able to do that then. I mean, hell, I believe you could easily do that right now or 20 years in the future.
But the only problem is, though, is what did the billionaires control? The billionaires control the social media platforms. And I know it sounds silly to some people. They're like, well, social media is not the only thing that people use to determine who they're going to vote for in an election. But these days, social media is one of the primary ways that people decide who they're going to vote for. Whether or not that sounds silly or not is another question, but that's just the way it works. So if you can control these massive platforms, and it's the billionaires that generally own a majority stake in these companies that control these things, they basically get to say who gets prioritized in these platforms and who doesn't, which, of course, that influences people greatly as to who they vote for. And they can just run smear campaign after smear campaign on particular candidates that they do not want to win, unless, of course, they have the support of that candidate for whatever they want them to support. So, and also, once you factor in lobbying as well, if certain politicians and certain people decide to support the candidate that's out of favor with these billionaires, they can simply threaten to pull funding from these people, and they won't support that new candidate that they don't like, the billionaires, that is. So there's just a lot of extra strings that are added into place these days that sort of like gatekeep the entire system to only let the people in that the billionaires really want in, honestly. I'm not one of these people that's like anti-billionaire, by the way. If you earn your money and you're a billionaire, I say more power to you. I'm not against them, but there is a lot of extra influence over the government that shouldn't be there right now based on that sort of money sides of things.
I would have to say That's an interesting point. I would have to be honest with y'all here, and of course, this isn't trying to say that I have a political leaning towards one side or the other. I think with the stuff I told y'all earlier, y'all should know I don't have any political leanings towards any direction. But I am generally anti-billionaire when it comes to them being involved in the government in any way. They shouldn't be involved in the government. If anything, the billionaires shouldn't have any control over the government. The government should have control over everything. Because if a billionaire has control in any way of any facet of the government, they are pretty much above the law at that point, as they exist as an apparatus that pretty much is creating the current government by their own circumstance. So I generally would say that I'm very against that. Not against anyone being a billionaire. If you work incredibly hard and somehow make it to that point, oh, good on you. That's great. But at the same time, I'm entirely against anyone having that kind of control or power over the federal government or any government, even a state government at that point. So that would be my take on it. I guess it's almost the same point Matthew's making, but I just want to make it clear I'm not at all for them having any kind of involvement or sway over the government, really, as I am for any individual having any kind of control or sway over the government, whether that be the leader of a foreign nation or billionaires or anyone else who could have that kind of an influence or sway. The government should be the only thing that really holds the power and control in the country, because it's elected and representative of the people themselves. So having a billionaire largely placing the chips on who gets in and who is out pretty much means that they have the control over the government, and they are practically above the law at that point, because they can really bend the government to whatever they need because of the financial control they have over the Congress members and other folks who are in it. So that would be my take on it. But
I hear you want to hear a hot take, and let's see if this even is a hot take, because I think some people interpreted this as a hot take, but it's really not, in my opinion. We should only have the people that we elect as the people of the United States actually in the government, actually representing our interests. That should be it, and it should stop at that. If we didn't elect that person, they should be nowhere near the government. End of the story. I don't even know how that's sort of gotten blurred in like the recent years or so. But if it doesn't matter if they're a billionaire or not a billionaire or whoever, if they were not elected, they shouldn't be there controlling anything or having a say in anything. Because otherwise, what does the election mean if these people that weren't elected are going to start taking large power and control over things? That wouldn't make any sense. I think most people will know what I'm talking about on that. I think that should be something that pretty much everybody thinks. It doesn't matter what you believe politically. That's a simple one to me. I don't see why other people would see it different, to be honest.
yeah, I found that bizarre recently that everyone's like, oh yeah, this guy who's just not, he's not even a citizen of like a natural born citizen of the United States. Which is interesting. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that in a bureaucratic position where you get appointed by the president. You have to be natural born though to be the president. But beyond that, they sit there and let this guy, like today, I don't know if you saw this, Matthew, stand behind the desk at the Oval Office like he's also the second in charge, and he's not even appointed to any actual government office, and also he wasn't elected by anyone. It's like what the hell is this guy doing here? It's like that guy should not be here, because he's, one, no one really elected him, and two, he's pretty much just existing outside of the government at this point, and now he's getting into intimate knowledge of government operations. It's like that's a big no-no right there in my book.
Money talks. That's like the biggest like billboard for money talks ever. It's just insane. Like I just can't even, I don't even comprehend it. Like that's something that's honestly disturbed me a little bit. Is I just don't comprehend that whole thing. Also, did you notice they've actually renamed Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America on Google? Look at that.
Yeah,
like, I just noticed that.
I mentioned that earlier in the stream, and you didn't say anything. I was like,
yeah,
man,
I didn't really like register that when you said it, but I just looked down while I was talking. I was like, does that say Gulf of America? And it does. That's whack to actually see it saying Gulf of America like that. Did they just change that today?
They changed it yesterday. I'm still calling it the Gulf of Mexico.
That's crazy. That's honestly nuts.
It's nuts. Like, dude, that just doesn't even look right. Like it doesn't, like, look, man, I think you can agree with me at this point now, seeing it on the map. That just doesn't even look right.
I don't even know really what to think about it. I'm still in the same position. I don't really care what it's called. If it's called Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. But it was an interesting thing to do, just considering how bad it pissed Mexico off. But It is what it is.
Also, really quickly, I see someone saying he's not making any decisions. He's going through the budget. No, he's making decisions. Like, don't be mistaken. He's making decisions. He's going through the budget. They're having interviews with federal employees, and then he goes to the office of the president and tells them, "I want you to fire these people," and those people are fired. Like, that's what's going on right now. He's making the decisions. And you could say, no, the president's the one who's actually pulling the trigger, but this guy got the president elected, largely through his funding and support. So he's practically the one pulling the trigger at this point because of the financial connections and control he has over the president. I find that kind of a deal to be a bit of an un-American kind of a thing, to be entirely honest, especially coming from someone who has some specifically invested interests that appear to be benefiting himself and his shareholders and his companies more so than trying to benefit the public, and he's feeding the public pablum saying that he's trying to help them out. Let me ask you all this. A billionaire, one of the richest billionaire on earth, is wanting to help out the common people? Like, I'm not saying that can never be the case, but think about it. All right, we were going to put tariffs on pretty much everything coming from Canada and Mexico, which would largely cripple the automotive industry. You know, one company that wouldn't be crippled by that? His company, because it produces all of their automobiles in the United States of America. So he would be giving that company a specific economic advantage over pretty much every other car manufacturer in the United States. Now, that's a little interesting when you think about it. Why not that? Why not when like, for example, the high-speed rail projects, or the Hyperloop, as it was called, how come that was never expected to succeed? Every single physicist out there said that will never work. And California diverted all their funding from their high-speed rail programs into the Hyperloop, and it failed. That kind of speaks for itself, in my opinion. Like, that's not really something invested in public interests. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, I'm not getting political. I see some people saying political. I honestly have a fair argument. I was kind of getting on the border of it. Didn't mean to do that. But no, I thought the thing about not letting non-elected people be in the government, I thought that was pretty neutral on that one. But we got a little bit political, though, I will say that. So we got to reel it back in a little bit. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Bobo Vasquez, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Bobo, for that $20 support. And we appreciate that very much. And Bobo said, y'all keep delivering. So I had to give up a $20 dono. And thank you very much, Bobo, for that. I appreciate it. And also, more JFK in the future.
And I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, you can have some more of that in the future because we like to do it. But nevertheless, thank you once again for the support, and put some tallow on that thing. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, I hope our JFK impression was satisfactory, Bo. I saw him asking for that earlier, so I delivered earlier, so I hope you enjoyed it. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Danny B. Thank you very much, Danny B, for that $20 super chat. We appreciate it very much. And Danny says, "Good evening, Enforcers," and Chef Danny here. And I'm so close to getting this ghost kitchen set up, and I'm going, and going. And if USA and Israel, I'm sorry, Danny, I screwed your super chat all up. Let me start from the beginning. He said, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. I'm so close to getting the ghost kitchen set up and going. And if USA and Israel does go into Gaza, would Iran get directly involved or cut their losses and LSA?"
I believe that Iran would probably try and lob some more missiles at Israel, but they're most likely going to get bombed here incredibly soon, for the large part, whether they get involved or not. So I think they'd try and get involved to at least save some face when they get bombed, to make it look like it was a retaliatory thing than anything. But yes, I believe that largely will be the case. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope we addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, someone said something in the live chat over here. It was a new person in the live chat I've never seen before. I'll say this. Let me say this. I'm not going to get political with this, so y'all take it easy. Not getting political. Someone said, "You're crazy if you're against auditing the government." No, I'm for auditing the government. Like, there should be accountability everywhere. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But the person who is doing it, it does matter who's doing it. If it's just some person that's a civilian that's not been elected, that's, to me, a pretty big distinction, actually. So I'll just leave it at that, though. Y'all can decide what y'all want to think about it and everything like that. I don't want to get us back into politics.
I just want to address this really quick. This isn't getting political, but someone said, "I think it's anti-American to deny a titan of American business to make political decisions." I don't know what planet planet you're on. But nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it say we have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, and by the way, the oligarchs of the country get to run it as well as a fourth branch of government. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. The government is supposed to be entirely elected by the people and representative of the people, so I don't know why the hell anyone, just because they have some money, ought to have an additional say in the government unduly outside of those three branches. That just flies in the face of the U.S. Constitution completely. I don't know if that's going to be made into a political thing or not by some people who are listening to this. That's not political. That's literally just constitutional at that point. Like, why the hell should just one person out there, because they have hundreds of billions of dollars, have some undue say in the government because they have money? Like, they weren't elected. Like, so why in the world did they get a say? That makes no sense. And that's largely unconstitutional. Act like they have a right to have a say more so than any other citizen. They have a vote. Their vote counts as one. Doesn't count more than one vote because they have a couple of $100 billion. So with that, I hope that addresses that well. That person then went entirely off the rails. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, just one more disclaimer as well. If you think the opposite of what I'm saying, like, I'm not saying you're wrong necessarily. I'm just saying, my opinion on it. So, not trying to attack anybody that thinks the other thing. Yeah, there's fair arguments to both, but I'm personally staying with my opinion on that one. Like usual, honestly. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Nightmare Before Christmas, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Nightmare Before Christmas, for that support. They said, big news today, and please take a question. LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And it was big news. And we will make sure to take a live chat question. So what do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
And this one right here goes to, let's see here. This one goes to Activista, who says, does the Assad equation change if Putin becomes gone? Wait a minute, I think I already asked that one. Activista, I'm sorry about that. I already asked that question earlier. So let me ask a different one. This one goes to Lucky Pants, who says, did you hear the new of the King of Jordan?
No, I did not, unfortunately. So I'll have to declare ignorance on that one. But still, thank you so much for sponsoring it, live chat, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, Varman and Rod said, damn, we're still talking about the topic I brought up in the live chat. I'm shocked. Honestly, it turned into a rabbit hole, really. But anyway, it was a good topic. But moving on here to our next super chat question. This one goes to Brendan West, who threw us in the second super chat of the night. And thank you very much, Brendan, for that $10 super chat. He asked the same question again and said you can ignore it because I already asked it once. But thank you very much, Brendan, for the second support of the night. And we appreciate that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, let me go ahead and put this like little thing right here. We got a bot in here going berserko. Also, by the way, I saw someone in the live chat say in a couple of years or something like that, humanoid robots will replace so many jobs. Honestly, like, I would have to say this, the more I've been learning about how fast AI is developing, like in the last 6 months especially, it sounds like, based on what they're saying, unless it's just all hype talk, which it could be hype talk, it sounds like in the next 2 or 3 years, the country could be undergoing a massive economic change anyway because of the advancement of AI taking over jobs, that maybe the normal way of working for people is not going to be the same way it's always been in the past. That's a big statement to make, but it seems like things could be coming up to a monumental shift, like with the way the society works in the United States and also other countries around the world because of that technology taking off. So I'll be curious to see what that turns into. I'll be honest, a little bit interesting, kind of scary at the same time, because you're kind of like, well, what are we going to do for an economy if we're not, on a goods and services type of economy? And especially if services, that whole industry gets knocked out by AI. Then what do those people do for a job at that point? They got to go get retrained to work on AI systems. I don't even understand how that'll work, but that's something we'll be dealing with in a couple of years, I'm sure. But anyways, moving on here to our next super chat. This one goes to Jay Bagwell, a channel legend, by the way, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Jay, for that support. He said, I used to visit the Aviator Bar in Montgomery. It's a neat place. I think you'd like it. And Jay, is that in front of Gunner, by the way? Because I think I saw that before, if I'm thinking about the right place. Let's see if it does.
Let's see. The Aviator Bar is actually in downtown near Union Station, interestingly enough.
Yeah, it's not the one I was thinking about. I was thinking about some sketchy one in front of the base, but no, this is like a really nice one, actually. That looks pretty neat, actually, Jay.
Dude, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, we never got to see this. I didn't even know this was here. Yeah, I would like this, actually. I would like to go down there and see that now. I'd probably get shot making my way down there, but I'd still take a look. But with that, thank you so much for the support, J Bagel. I hope that does address that well. And a pretty interesting place, but it's near the alley. That's like one of the only nice areas of downtown Montgomery. It's this little alley right here. I'll show it to y'all. Boom, the alley. You walk down there. There's some neat stuff down there, actually. I remember that. But I never got to go down into that building. That's a shame, actually. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Avari Mendebranas, who puts in 2 super chats, $10 donations, and thank you very much, Avari, for that support as always. And in the first one, he said, scenario, Su-35 violated Polish airspace, pilot hears missile lock and then launch warning, and missile explodes halfway to target, sending debris, and pilot shits himself. What happens next?
Probably nothing. That actually happened a while ago. The Russians actually fired at a British aircraft in the Black Sea, and the missiles never hit. So the entire incident was just overlooked and brushed under the rug, and that happened in, I believe, early 2023, if I remember correctly. So nothing would happen as a consequence of that. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I just, man, I see people bringing up some points, man. It makes me want to get back into it. Someone said, Georgia Washington, actually it's George Washington, was a big advocate for cabinet members and advisors. How is this different? The difference is that this person got, this specific person we're talking about, elected. That's the difference. They have an undue financial influence over the president. I'm totally fine with advisors, and I'm totally fine with unelected people being appointed into positions. Totally fine with that, because that's how the federal agencies run, is that the president appoints those people. But the president was elected by the people, so there was a decision in that. Like, there was a decision that the president will make the best choices, picking out the department heads of these federal agencies. And it was decided that the president would create a cabinet of the best minds in America. But who's to say that the best minds in America will, but here's what I have to say. This is a better way of putting it. I'm totally fine with the cabinet and totally fine with the president picking his cabinet. Problem is when someone has undue financial influence over the president. That's where the line is drawn, because then that's not an advisor. That's more so the dictator to the president. I got you in here, so I pull your strings, do what I say. That's the kind of influence that starts to become very questionable. Totally fine with advisors. Totally fine with an advisor saying, hey, I think we should do this and that and that. I think that's great. Like, it's great to have many opinions and different ideas coming from different people. But when one of those people pretty much holds the financial strings that got you there, then it's not really advising, it's more so telling. Because you got them there, so they better listen to what you say, or else other things could happen that could be consequences. So I hope that it kind of addresses that well, at least in my opinion, because that's really how it works. That's also why, like, I'm generally against lobbying, because that's pretty much the same thing just across the board for every Congress member, or really anyone who's in the government that was lobbied to get into their position. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And someone said, you think the president would take orders from someone else? Well, you think any Congress member would? Because, I mean, hell, once they get elected, they're practically in there for life. So, you know, why in the world do they take answers from their super PACs and their supporters? That seems to me to show there is an undue influence there. I'm just generally against lobbying, I'll be entirely honest with you. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Avari once again, who puts in a 10 and says, can we get a hood review? Compare Houston 9th Ward against Houston Heights.
Houston 9th Ward. Houston 9th Ward. Let's see if we can find the 9th Ward. Let's see here. 9th Ward. It seems like there's only a 9th Ward in New Orleans. So we could look at the 9th Ward. It's just that, you know, we already kind of know what that one looks like. So let's see. Here we go. So what was the other one, Matthew?
It was Houston 9th Ward and Houston Heights.
I can't find the 9th Ward, but we can probably find Houston Heights in Houston, Texas, which is in downtown. So it's going to be a rough one, folks. Buckle up. Oh, hell, this is actually not that bad. Well, the road's not really great, but, you know, the general surroundings aren't actually that bad looking. Way better, honestly. Wow, this actually looks great. You got little arts and crafts houses. That's a Sears catalog house right there. I mean, you know, this isn't that bad. Like, oh, I think this is fine. Like, looks like a nice place. Might get shot, you know, I don't know. Like, I'd have to find out. But this actually looks pretty freaking nice. I'm not gonna, you know what? This is very nice, actually, compared to where we came from. I think this is great, actually.
Also, Avari said try the 5th Ward.
The 5th Ward. 5th Ward. Houston, Greater Fifth Ward. So let's take a look at that. So here's that picture already is giving us an idea.
Man, this is one of these places you drive to and you don't drive out.
You check in, but you don't check out. Kind of. Oh yeah. The little row houses here, very telling. Probably high crime rate. For some reason, those row houses. Oh, yeah. When the Street View car hasn't been through here since 2007, it's bad. No one just wants to go through here and take a look. So, yeah, this is a rougher place. This is a rough place. This is like Montgomery, honestly, at this point. So, yeah, not a great place. But anyways, I hope that does address that somewhat well. Thank you for letting us take a look at those two places. Very different looking. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it's folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And also, folks, I see some people are saying maybe we're getting on the verge of being political. Maybe. So we will digress from those topics. Just that some things have been happening recently where I'm like, I don't really like that, but we'll leave it at that. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Labu II or LLM, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Labu, for that support. They said, keep up the good work.
And thank you so much for the support, and we will try and keep up the good work as best we can. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Barry Woodward, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Barry, for the support. He says, is Saturday's noon line in the sand DC time or Gaza local time? And LSA rocking the stream?
I don't know. I actually do not know. We're a little bit unsure on that at the moment. But I would assume it's probably their time. But I could be wrong. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, thank you once again for enjoying the stream and saying that we're doing pretty good at it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Amber, who puts in a 5 and says, my time is jealously allocated, yet I watch your full programs. Why? Because your coverage is fascinating, fun, and bunny hole filled. And I love the details retired accountants love that. Wait a minute, I messed that up the last sentence there. He said, love the details, retired accountants love that.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting details. It's all in the details. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for the kind words. And thank you for giving us your full time watching the stream. We always love to know that people are watching this thing full time for the large part, because it's crazy to think that we get about 4 hours of y'all's time every day. That's a big snippet of the day. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Mulder's Channel, who puts in a 5 as well. And thank you very much, Mulder's Channel, for that support. And they said, who will get India their oil from now? And LSA.
Most likely the Middle East, I would assume at this point, or the United States, because those are really the only major oil providers in the world that would be left for India. Or they could get it from Iran. But I have a feeling they're probably not going to get it from Iran. So it's mostly going to be any of the other Middle Eastern states or the United States of America. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Nightmare Before Christmas, who puts in a 5 as well. And thank you very much, Nightmare Before Christmas, for that support. They said, don't they have bounties on drones? And maybe it's a scam.
Maybe. I don't know the bounty on the drones that you're talking about. My finger just slid over the armrest right there and made like a ring sound. But I don't know what bounties you're talking about, unfortunately. So I think I'd have to declare ignorance on that one. But I still thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to I'm Yankee, GG, who put in a 5 and says, Rochester, New York, Upper Falls, Clinton Avenue, Hood.
I like how they put in hood, like just hood. It's like how like the hobos would write on things, and it would be like simple stuff like violent family, avoid. Like it would be stuff like that in the hobo signs. And do you know what I'm talking about, man? You like the hobo sign thing?
No.
So the hobos actually had let's see, hobo signs. Let me go see here. The hobos actually had a specific kind of signs and symbology that they would use to represent different things. Like this duck would be a free telephone. Like and stuff like that. Like that was almost like that. Like you just put one of these signs, like this little dash is just like hood. Like crime committed here, not safe. Dude, that's literally the hood. Like that's actually the hood one that I went to right here.
That's crazy. And who came up with these again?
Hobos, like traveling around in the Great Depression, they would come up with these symbols that way other hobos would know what's good and what's not good and what to avoid and what not to avoid.
Damn, they were actually like pretty smart to come up with a whole like language system like this to like communicate. How'd they spread this around to other people?
They would just spread it around through word of mouth. So because the depression lasted so long, man. I mean, it lasted for like all the way up until 1941 at the beginning of World War II from 1929. So it had a long enough time. They came up with their own symbol system, like this one right here. Kind woman lives here. Tell a pitiful story. So you go up to the door. Oh, well, I'm ridden with cancer. Oh, give me money, and then she'd give you money or something. Stuff like that. It's a very interesting kind of thing. I've been looking at this over the past few days. But beyond that, very interesting. That was kind of like that, though. It reminded me of that. It was like crime committed here, not safe. It was like this street in Rochester, hood. But anyways, what was the street, Matthew?
The street is it's Upper Falls Clinton Avenue, Hood.
Upper Falls Clinton Avenue. This right here? Or is it? Let's see. Let's just type it in. Clinton Avenue. Assuming it's this one. Yeah.
Oh, I know where this is up here. I think there was a music video shot on the street, actually.
Oh, yeah. This is the hood. Yeah, like you can tell.
Yeah.
Because like there's these row houses that have just been these like row buildings that have just been knocked down, and yeah, this place looks rough. But yeah, you can just tell. Like the graffiti on the walls over there. Yes, very telling, very telling. This kind of reminds me of Philly a little bit. Like that area that we went to up in there. Remember that?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, interesting. Look at that T-Rex over there.
That Velociraptor.
Oh, Velociraptor.
Yeah.
Man, that's the one that just learned how to open the doors yesterday.
Dude, next thing you know, it's going to be making a rap song, Mustard on the Beat. Like something like that. Like, oh man, let's see here. This is a place. Like, it's not good. Yes, this is a hood for sure. I would say so. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, thank you once again for support and sharing that with us. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Taco of Love, who puts in a 5 and says, I'm late. Did you discuss the minerals for weapons deal made with the U.S. and Ukraine?
Oh yeah, that was days ago actually. Like you're days late. That was a good while ago, a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Serenity Palette, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Serenity, for that support. Also, big shout out to Gavin Nesflick as well as Marc-Andre Brunette for also throwing in a $2 support as well. But thank you to all three of you for that support. But sadly, no comments to address, but we appreciate it. And thank you both very much. And we also have a 2 from Martin Jinx, who says, sorry, it's not more.
Oh, any support is great support. It could be $1, and we'd be incredibly appreciative for it. So I got to thank you massively for your support, because it's helping this channel to keep on running. Whether you think it's a lot or not, we appreciate every cent. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Praptor, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Praptor. He said, hit the like button, people.
And please do hit the like button. We've gotten 3,400 likes tonight. That's actually a large amount of them for 63,000 views. But please hit that like button. We like to see it. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Plazat, who puts in a $3 donation. And thank you very much, Plazat, for that $3 support and helping to keep the channel running. And they said, coffee.
And thank you so much, Plazath, for the coffee fund. We need coffee, a lot of coffee, a great deal of coffee, long-lasting coffee, because it helps us to keep this channel running, and I thank you massively for that. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is actually going to be going right into our live chat questions proper, because we're fresh out of super chat questions. And once again, a huge shout out to everybody for supporting the channel once again tonight with the super chat funds, because we do appreciate it very much. And of course, it helps to keep the lights on and the channel brewing. No, not the channel brewing, the coffee brewing and the channel running, the channel brewing. But anyways, I digress. Our next one here is a super chat. This one goes to Butchie777, who puts in a £10 donation and puts in the YouTube hippo skirting around a corner in an office chair. I would love a powered office chair like that. That looks pretty nice, actually. But thank you very much, Butchie, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Butchie777, and helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because you're one of our British viewers from across the seas that helps us to keep this thing rolling and makes this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the Morse code decoders. So what do we have, Matthew?
All right, so our Morse code decoders of the night were Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, Dave Millsaps, Roy Fluffiness, Arabella Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said the Morse code tonight says, in good shape anytime soon, LLT, LSA, and also stream buffer during the code, so probably missed a little bit.
Yes, there was some, but that's the sound of money, and you don't get that dent on the nail, at least the part that y'all could hear, because the lag hit hard during that segment. But I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct. Even through the lag, y'all still got the back half of it. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that right again tonight, because y'all continue to let everyone know what the Morse code message is for over 1,000 days at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And moving on from that, we have a $10 super chat from Michael, the first super chat ever. Hey! And Michael said, Enforcers, you are the best channel on YouTube by far, 100% honest and true. And I got to thank you so much for the support.
Well, thank you.
And saying that. We like to be as upfront and honest as possible and keep politics out of it. Although we started to kind of dance on the line, apparently, a little while ago. I'll be honest with y'all, I didn't really think that was a political point I was making. But apparently, in the kind of world we live in these days, it's a political thing. I did not know. But anyways, that's kind of an interesting thing sometimes. Sometimes we'll throw up something that we think everyone can agree on, and then people start fighting over it and claim it's political, which is a little bit crazy to me, because we've been called Nazis and communists on different things because we'll say something and people think we're in a different political party from them at that point. It's a weird thing with how that works, but I still thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the third to last question of the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this question here is going to go to, let's see here, scrolling through here to pick the best, actually not the best necessarily, but just the ones we haven't answered so far for the night. Let's see, this one is going to go to, let's see here, this one goes to DT, who says, do you think that Putin knows the whole truth about how the war is going in Ukraine, or is it being kept from him?
I have a feeling he probably does know, and he probably knows that it's not really going that well, and it's going fairly poorly, because that's why they're firing Oreshniks into Ukraine. We actually just had to ban a viewer who's been here for a bit. You know who it is, Matthew. It was not that long ago. You guys are naive. 1.5 million dead on both sides, and you think Ukraine is winning? You're crazy. Both sides are losing. It's a stalemate. I don't know why that almost started sounding like Jerry Seinfeld right there. Like it almost turned into that, but like, I don't really know what that person thinks World War II was, because, you know, like 30 million people died in the Soviet Union alone. I think it was 60 million worldwide. I guess he calls that a defeat on all sides. What is going on? You guys are losing! You know, something like that. It's like, I don't know. But like, the honest truth is that the Ukrainians are doing good. I mean, if they were doing badly, why is the Russians taking the time to try and fire intermediate range ballistic missiles at them as a threat? You know, if they were winning, why are they threatening them? You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make much sense. So I hope that does address that well. But that would largely be my take at this point. And so with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this one is going to go to AF Kaplan, who says, regarding the EU's plan to go after Russia's shadow fleet, could either Slovakia or Hungary do anything to interfere with the plan?
I don't think so. Because I believe the EU is a majority rules kind of thing, so Slovakia and Hungary turn it down, the rest of the EU goes with it, and they go ahead and act on that plan. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from what I understand. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Ed, who said, Matt, do you think that the Baltic states will end up having a naval blockade against Russian tankers?
Reread that one more time.
They said, do you think that the Baltic states will end up having a naval blockade against Russian tankers?
not specifically the Baltic states. I actually feel like that will most likely be spearheaded by the larger countries in the Baltic, Finland, Sweden, Germany, and Poland, more so than anyone else in the EU, because I don't believe the Baltic states have incredibly large navies. They'll be a part of it, but really the Germans and the Polish will be providing the bulk of the muscle that would be used to start blockading or really impounding Russian Shadow Fleet vessels. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, it is the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every one of you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover the news for each and every single one of you all. A true real honor. And I got to thank you all once again for being here tonight. We had 10.6 thousand people here at the peak, and we've had 63,000 people watch the stream so far. A big thanks to you all once again for watching. Hopefully we'll be able to have a short war video out tomorrow. We were supposed to have one out today, but there were some things that happened that made that not possible. But hopefully we will have one out tomorrow, and y'all will be getting the news then and later on that night. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, we will be seeing you all tomorrow on the Short War video. If there is enough news to cover midday tomorrow, you'll be hearing from the Enforcer on the Short War video. And also, of course, at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight, you'll be hearing another war news stream just like this one. So be sure to join us once again. And huge shout out to all 63,000 people that joined us tonight on this live stream. And also, let's see, someone said, how old are you guys? Late 40s? Yeah,
early 20s.
I'm going on, going on 24. But anyways, thank you all for watching once again. We'll see you all tomorrow. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and good night.